Chapter 91. 3. The truth is just that cruel, what did you say? Xianyuan Che's eyes widened incredulously as he fell back a step. How could the imperial concubine? That beautiful and elegant woman was in such a high position, and she was pregnant with an imperial heir, which was such matter of such high glory. She should have been highly protective of the child in her abdomen, so how could she possibly get herself involved in something so absurd like an illicit affair with another man? There must be something more to it, no matter how one looked at it. Seeing him show a look of such utter disbelief, Mu Qi then curled up the corners of his lips mockingly. You asked me why I had my identity as the imperial heir denounced, and was made to suffer punishment. Ha! Of course the brilliant and honorable emperor back then had thought that since my mother dared to do such a horrible deed, maybe I am also a bastard child from some other men as well. Despite the fact my highly aged maternal grandfather had knelt outside the main hall to beg for benevolence to have me spared, and he had even refused to prove my lineage through dripping a drop of our blood to see if they joined. When he spoke about that, Mu Qi then laughed out loud, his face slowly coming closer. So close that Xianyuan Che was able to clearly see his own reflection in the young man's crystal-clear eyes, the young man's breath coming out through Mu Qi's slightly open mouth lightly brushing over Xianyuan Che's cheek. I hate you. That's right. There were many times I nearly lost control and wanted to kill you. The young man's eyes were so beautiful it seemed they could almost talk, coming to be tainted with murder in an instant. All of it had been the work of your mother, that gentle and virtuous empress. Mu Qi said, pausing between each and every word, the expression on his face mocking and filled with ridicule. How hilarious it is that my mother had treated her as close as a sister for so many years. Just because the imperial physician deduced that it was another prince in her abdomen, and because everyone else were saying that I am the one who has the ability to vie for the position of becoming the heir against you. Mu Qi hated not just the empress, he hated Xianyuan Che, and the person he hated the most was himself. He should not have displayed his own talents, should not have gotten close to Xianyuan Che, and really shouldn't have competed with Xianyuan Che in everything, which then caused the empress to grow wary, which went on to cause his little brother to be cruelly harmed before he could even be born, and brought harm upon the mother whom had loved him so much. I do not believe that. Xianyuan Che pushed Mu Qi away from him harshly. How could my mother possibly do something like this? Ha, it's up to you whether you want to believe or not. Mu Qi's lips stiffened. Why do you think she isn't able to sleep well at night for so many years and turned to Buddhism, becoming a staunch vegetarian? That is because she had cruelly taken the lives of two people, the first one my mother's, the second being my little brother who did not have the affinity to come into this world, whose aggrieved spirits have been haunting your mother to return them their lives. Although the Mu family is a family clan of elixir cultivators, but back in the day, my mother not only possessed outstanding skills in medicine, she was also a spirit master. So if there was aggrievement and injustice present before death, her spirit would continue to haunt the person who brought upon her death. Mu Qi said very slowly. He stared at Xianyuan Che, who was in a daze, looking like he had been dealt an enormous blow. Mu Qi curled up the corners of his lips and picked up the wine urn with one hand. He took a large gulping swallow with a throw of his head backwards before he wiped the trickle of wine that had spilled out the corners of his mouth with his sleeve indifferently, and then lifted his foot to walk out from there. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. At the very moment he stood outside, his footsteps halted a moment as he said emotionlessly. I know that this matter does not have anything to do with you, but what happened back then is something I will never be able to forget. So Xianyuan Che, I had originally not wanted to bring the matter up ever again, but since everything is out in the open now, then we can only do this. The two of us are probably no destined to be brothers, and in future, we should just treat each other as strangers. Upon saying that, the tall slender body then gradually went further into the distance. Strangers. Ha! You wish. A glint of darkness then flashed across the man's gentle and refined face, and the exquisite wine cup in his hand was suddenly crushed into dust. Chapter 92. 1. Hades Canyon. The day for training in the wilderness arrived in the blink of an eye. Yen Shiro and Yen Shiwu had received strict instructions from their mother that if they were not able to establish friendly relations with the pair of siblings from the tranquil abode, they must remember that they must at least not become enemies. Although the two sisters did not know the reason for that, but upon hearing that even the highly shrewd Mo Han Yen, who was known to be brilliant and sophisticated in her ways, had fallen before that pair of siblings, the hearts of the sisters immediately quivered in trepidation, quietening themselves down. It was heard that the last Qin Yu was even an elixir cultivator as well, and following behind her might just earn them some advantages, and the two sisters started hatching their own plans. Qin Fang came bright and early to the Eternal Peace Duke Manor, at roughly the time that the servants were just waking up. The sky was just turning the color of a fish's underbelly over the horizon, and he had not expected that he would see two figures standing at the door, seeming like they had already been waiting there for very long. Qin Fang's face lit up with a tinge of admiration, and he walked over there to say, "The two of you woke up so early?" The two people stopped their conversation when they saw that Qin Fang had come, and Qin Yu smiled as she said, "Even the elder is here so early, how can we possibly expect you to wait for us instead?" Qin Fang nodded his head in satisfaction. He had originally set the time as the third quarter of the Mao hour just at dawn, and he had come about half an hour early. But it was clear to see that these two young ones had been waiting here for a long time, and he liked people who were on time very much. Because it was not time yet, and the sisters Yen Shiro and Yen Shiwu had not yet come, Qin Fang then chatted with the pair of siblings for a while. His wise and intelligent gaze then looked on appraisingly at the young lady with that countenance of peerless beauty and her smiling eyes. Without knowing why, he could not help but feel that the lass was hiding quite a lot of secrets. From the time that she managed to hide her highly profound cultivation back before, Qin Fang was already a little suspicious that her real abilities were actually more than she was showing. With that thought in mind, he then asked carefully probingly, "Do you know why I want all of you to set off from here early?" Hearing that, Qin Yu pressed her lips together in a smile, and she then turned to look towards the youth beside her with an eyebrow arched up. "You want us to get into the habit of waking up early, so that our bodies are able to adjust to its optimum state, which would aid us greatly in our cultivation." Qin Fang's brows creased into a frown as he shook his head. Qin Yu chuckled softly and then said, "Because we are going to the Hades Canyon this time, and the place is filled with a thick vaporous miasma which grows even thicker under the beating of the sun's rays. But once it reaches the Mao hour, the miasma will recede, and we will only be able to enter that place at this time. Otherwise, once the sky grows bright, we'll not even be able to find the entrance into the place." Hearing Qin Yu's explanation, the youth then nodded his head in understanding. Qin Fang then said in surprise, "How did you know that we'll be going to Hades Canyon? And how did you come to know about the time the miasma will recede?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Over the recent period, the elder has spoken to us about many places filled with various dangers, and described the characteristics and weaknesses of many types of spirit beasts. The Hades Canyon is a place that is famously known to have many spirit beasts, where all kinds and variety of them roam, and the level of danger in this place is not exceptionally high, considered to be just slightly above average in level, which is most suitable for us, people who are undergoing training in the wilderness for the first time. As for the time the miasma recedes. Qin Yu's words paused a moment, before she then continued in a slightly pleased tone, "I discovered that when I went to the perimeters of Hades Canyon and remained there overnight." The young lady's words astounded Qin Fang even more. That also meant, under the circumstances, that nothing had been revealed to her. She had based merely on the small signs and little clues he had unconsciously revealed over the recent period with his words, to deduce and ascertain the location of their wilderness training he had decided upon. Chapter 92. 2. Hades Canyon. And as such a young little girl, she had actually dared to go running all by herself to scout out such a dangerous place. That kind of bravery made Qin Fang unable to help himself but sigh aloud, truly an example of newborn calves aren't afraid of tigers. Besides her, Qin Bei could only glance at her helplessly. No wonder he had not seen her around a couple of days back. So she had gone off on her own to scout the place. The few of them continued to chat and 3/4 of an hour passed without them knowing. The sound of a flurry of hurried footsteps then reached their ears from inside the Eternal Peace Duke Manor before the figure of Yan Shiwu appeared first as Yan Shiroa came from behind looking rather dispirited, almost as if she had not fully awakened from sleep. Although Qin Fong was feeling slightly displeased, he did not say anything. The 3/4 of the Mao hour might have passed but they were not really very late. They were after all spoilt and pampered young misses used to fine clothes and food, and they had probably never had to wake up so early ever before. Compared to Qin Yu and Qin Bei, Qin Fong was rather displeased with the pair of sisters. Though they lived in same manor of the Duke, the characters of the two pairs of siblings differed very greatly. The Hades Canyon was in the western side of the Green Wave Kingdom and it would take them less than an hour to reach there from the imperial capital on horseback, and the sky wouldn't have brightened by much at that time. After Qin Fong brought them to the destination, he would not be moving together with them after that, but went on to give each of them a transmission jade token. If they came to encounter danger or they are unable to remain in there any longer, they would just have to crush the jade token and they would be able to come out. But once the jade token was crushed, it would mean that they had failed the wilderness training. The environment inside Hades Canyon was rather unusual. It was almost always pitch dark inside and there were only about 4 hours of daylight in there every day, with the entire place plunged in darkness the rest of the time. If one remained in there for too long, they would easily lose track of the time and date. Hence, Qin Fong had set the time for their wilderness training at 10 days. He would come back here to receive them after 10 days. When the few of them reached the Hades Canyon, a large part of the sky had lit up, gradually turning brighter. The entrance into the Hades Canyon showed itself fleetingly before them under a veil of white misty fog. It was a hole formed from strangely bent trees that was the height of several men. I will only be escorting all of you up to here. All of you can go your own way inside now. Qin Fong said indifferently. The mission I am giving you for this training is for each of you to collect at least 5 spirit beast cores that is of the 3rd level or higher. Yes, Elder. The few of them answered. Under Qin Fong's watchful gaze, they all went into the thick blurry fog and walked through the entryway. In almost the same instant that they came into the fog, it seemed as if the fog had suddenly become a lot thicker, and was emanating a faint almost unnoticeable fragrance. Qin Fong quickly retreated back by a few steps and covered his nose and mouth. The miasma was as dangerous as he had thought, and he wondered if all of them would be able to pull through. The entrance that was formed by the misshapen trees was now fully hidden and not a sign of its existence could be seen anymore. But not long after Qin Fong left, the enormous trees under the miasma suddenly quivered like humans and after a few rounds of transformation, the hole formed by the trees suddenly disappeared completely, turning to become a row of tall trees in a forest that could not look any more ordinary. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The little fox went to the Hades Canyon. At that same moment, in a private room within the fragrance court, the violet eyes of a man glinted as he asked. In front of him, Bai Ji Yen nodded his head. That's right. I just came to know about it. It seems like they set off yesterday before dawn and they went there for rigorous training to enable them to be admitted into the Faint Mist sect. Is that right? Lu Junyao curled up the ends of his lips. He then continued to ask, what's the situation like in Cloud Heaven recently? Chapter 92. 3. Hades Canyon. The batch of elixir cultivators we recruited before had quite a number of spies who sneaked in trying to gather information, but Little Monster was really smart. He brought out the antidote elixir cultivated by Qin, asked all of them to list out a breakdown of its components, and they had to produce an elixir that was exactly the same. What do you think was the result? When Bai Ji Yen spoke of that, the expression on his face just shone with delight. Not to even mention cultivating the elixir, not a single one among them was able to even name all the components correctly. I have to say that it is truly such a big waste that the lass is not in cloud heaven. With her level of talent and ability, even if she was in the White Fun lands, the guildmaster of their elixir cultivator guild will have to give up his position for her. You really think so highly of her? Lu Junyao said with an almost imperceptible smile. Anyone who was able to remain by Lu Junyao's side were all not ordinary people, and they were all afflicted with the same condition, which was arrogant haughtiness. Besides their own lord, they looked down on everyone else, with Bai Ji Yen the most extreme among the whole lot. Even in cloud heaven itself, there were not many people who convinced him, but his impression of Qin Yu had always been very good. Hearing that, Bai Ji Yen then blinked his beautiful-looking peach blossom-like eyes. That is only natural. Not to mention that her medical skills are already a few heads higher than mine, but just based on the fact that as a puerile little girl back then, she was able to escape from under your hands without a scratch on her and had even stolen the polar fire core, such guts and resourcefulness is enough to make me prostrate myself before her. But there is one matter that I still do not understand. The joking expression on Bai Ji Yan's face was suddenly restrained. The voodoo curse you were afflicted with back then was so powerful that even I was not able to get close at all. How come you were still fine when that little lass touched you? Lu Junyao was speechless. If even a superior grade elixir cultivator like you does not know, how could I possibly know anything about that? Lu Junyao had not said a word when Bai Ji Yan's expression froze for a moment, like he had just thought of something highly incredible. His tone of voice was rather hesitant as he said, "Could it possibly be like what is portrayed in all those skits everywhere? That only the one that is destined by fate is able to come in such close proximity?" Lu Junyao's gaze glinted sharply, and he then said in a dark tone, "I think you stayed too long in these warm and gentle villages for too long. That kind of thinking is highly dangerous." Bai Ji Yen was puzzled. Dangerous? I am already several hundred years old, and to me, that little fox is no different from a little young and innocent child. You can actually spout such words like the one destined by fate, isn't that very dangerous? Lu Junyao retorted. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Bai Ji Yan's face was serious. So what? Although the little lass is a little young, but her mind and the way she deals with things are anything but innocent. Moreover, she has good looks and has great character. Why can't she be the one destined in your life? Speaking up to this point, Bai Ji Yan's demeanor had become confrontational. Feeling highly displeased with the attitude Lu Junyao was showing, Bai Ji Yan was taking a terrifying stance that seemed to be saying, "The maiden is good in every single way, so how could you possibly not like her?" Ignoring Bai Ji Yan's nagging, a twitch tugged at Lu Junyao's temple as he resisted the urge to throw the person in front of him out of the window, but went on to say softly instead, "I heard that the injured lightning blaze unicorn you saved back then has advanced to the 11th level." That's right. The last time it advanced, I was almost struck half to death by its lightning tribulations. It's really so troublesome in these low-level lands. All spirit beasts above the 8th level have to be strictly confined. Lu Junyao succeeded in diverting Bai Ji Yan's attention away. Speaking of this, I had never thought that there would be such a great seedling of spirit beasts in such low-level lands. If I train and nurture it properly, it might have a chance of becoming a super divine beast. Where did you place it? Although it would be contained within a barrier, a lightning blaze unicorn beast like that could not possibly be kept in any ordinary place for long. Chapter 93. 1. Did this fella just fart? Bai Ji Yan shrugged his shoulders indifferently. In Hades Canyon. The geographical terrain there is rather unique, and the place is perpetually covered in a miasma of smog, the space in there ever-changing, a well-concealed place which is perfect for it to rest and recuperate. The voice had just fallen when Lu Junyao's handsome-looking countenance darkened and his eyes narrowed to a slit as he stared at Bai Ji Yan. What did you say? I told you it's in Hades Canyon, right? When Bai Ji Yan spoke those words, he seemed to feel that something felt wrong and the color of his face immediately changed. Hades Canyon. Oh God! Damn! It was still daytime in Hades Canyon at that moment, and an occasional strange-sounding screech would sound out in the skies overhead intermittently. Besides that, it felt unusually quiet. Yen Shiro was being rather dense, as even having come into such a dangerous place, she was still being so dispirited and downcast. It wasn't until they heard the strange calls that she sobered up a little. Yen Shiwu was watching the two people walking in front of her, and her eyes then flashed with a glint before she pulled Yen Shiro along to quickly catch up to the pair of twins in front. "Sis, did you come inside when you came here previously?" Qin Bei slanted his head to the side and asked. Qin Yu raised an eyebrow and glanced at him before she replied, "I stayed only at the perimeters the last time, and did not come in." Thinking back about it, it was rather strange. She had gone to many dangerous places throughout the years but somehow did not come here to Hades Canyon itself. The reason for that was not clear to her. It was as if this place had somehow been forgotten. After walking a good distance, what was surprising was that they did not encounter even the shadow of a single spirit beast. It was rumored that spirit beasts roam everywhere in the Hades Canyon, and they were starting to think that all of that had just been greatly exaggerated. But at that moment, they were about to face their first difficulty in there. Night was falling. The night that could last as long as 20 hours, a natural environment that was completely different from the world outside, which would cause one's heart to inadvertently grow nervous. A person would always come to feel a kind of inexplicable fear towards darkness, because it could hide many unknown dangers which might be quietly growing under the cover of such blind darkness. Only Qin Yu's eyes possessed an exceptional kind of sight, able to see in the dark. But all the others could not do that, and being shrouded in darkness for such long hours would cause their mind to grow weak and fill up with unease. Her eyes narrowed and she suddenly made a signal with her hand. A brilliant ball of golden-red streaked fire then appeared at her fingertips, illuminating the area around them against the darkness. Qin Bei did not show too big of a reaction, but Yen Shiro jumped with shock, where she then asked in surprise, "What is this skill?" She had heard that Qin Yu had been ascertained to be a fire element wielder in the test they underwent before, and she was actually able to summon fire out of thin air like this. Qin Yu ignored her and just said ominously, "There are some tree twigs on the ground beside you, go pick some and we can build a fire." Yen Shiro's eyes widened as she glared, and she raised a finger up to point at her nose in disbelief. "You want me to go pick tree twigs?" "Yen Qinyu, are you sure you are asking the right person? I am the Eternal Peace Duke Manor's third young miss and your elder sister. And you actually dare to order me to go carry out such a lowly and menial task? It was just gathering some twigs, and it has become a lowly menial task." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, it was be said that this girl's princess syndrome is rather serious. Looking at her face that looked like she had suffered some grave and unpardonable insult, Qin Bei then glanced scathingly at her and said, "Just go when you're told to. In here, there are no young misses or princesses, but only people who are alive or dead. Whether you would become a dead person would depend entirely on how you perform. If that girl does not rely on his elder sister, you won't even have to mention spirit beast cores. It would be a challenge for her just to remain alive in here." And here she was prissily putting on airs. How utterly foolish. Having been snubbed, Yen Shiro's face immediately turned even more ugly. Yen Shiwu beside her tugged at her sleeve lightly and signaled for her to be more cooperative. It was only then that Yen Shiro gave up and crouched down to pick up twigs with a highly aggrieved face. Chapter 93. 2. Did this fella just fart? Qin Yu could not help but smile as she watched that scene and waited a good while for Yen Shiro to gather the twigs. She then lit a fire with those twigs, which brightened up the area around them. Yen Shiro threw an indignant glare towards her and then shuffled over closer to the fire. She was just about to sit down and rest when her bottom sat upon something soft. Her entire body stiffened up and she only jumped up half a beat later to let out a sharp and shrill scream. "Eek, what's that?" The few of them turned their eyes to stare and saw a brown little snake that was about as thick as a thumb, coiled up lazily in sleep. It was rudely awakened by Yen Shiro when she sat on it, its eyes not yet fully open before it was shocked awake by a shrill scream. The little snake then showed high human contempt in its eyes and expression before it flicked its tail and stuck out its forked tongue in a loud hiss as it turned to slither away. All these lame humans. Why do I bump into them everywhere? Can't even get myself some peaceful sleep. Qin had watched all that happened, her phoenix-like eyes lit up with amusement. That little snake seems to have gained intelligence, and the look it showed in its eyes just now was so funny. Yen Shiro's face was an ugly shade as she looked at the little snake slithering away. It was quite a while before she then said rather awkwardly, So it was a snake. What did you think it was? Qin asked as she swept her emotionless gaze over Yen Shiro. Don't make such a big deal out of little things like this. Screaming so loudly, are you trying to draw all the spirit beasts to us? I'm sorry, it wasn't on purpose. Yen Shiro had also realized that her reaction just now had been very loud. If that had really attracted all the beasts here, not to mention completing the mission, she might very well just lose her life here. The group then sat down around the fire, the firelight lighting up the young lady's face with those exquisite features, making it look like there was a ball of fire burning within her alluring phoenix-like eyes. What should we do now? Yen Shiwu, who had remained silent all this time, suddenly asked. It's all pitch dark in here and nothing can be seen. We do not know where all those spirit beasts are hiding and if they suddenly run out to attack us. In Hades Canyon, only during the 4 hours of daylight was it comparatively safer, as most of the spirit beasts would be resting. But when night came, they would all start to get restless. Don't worry, regular spirit beasts would not dare to come close. Qin said with a smile. This fire that she lit was not meant to illuminate the area. Most spirit beasts were fearful of fire, and moreover, she had not used just any regular kind of fire. If one got caught even the slightest by the flames, it would be inextinguishable. Unless it was a spirit beast who had not yet gained intelligence, otherwise all lower-leveled spirit beasts would not come rushing to their own deaths to come attack them. We've walked for so long. Take this chance to get some rest first. Qin opened her mouth to say. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. At that moment, an untimely low growl suddenly sounded, and the few of them froze in place for a moment. It was Yen Shiro. With her head lowered, she then said in a voice as small as a mosquito's, I'm hungry. In order to train them in their survival skills, Qin Fong had been incredibly strict. He had only allowed them to bring 2 bottles of water and prohibited them from bringing any food at all. They were to deal with it themselves when they got hungry, and he had even inspected all of them to ensure it. Yen Shiro was one of the plumper ones among them, and her energy level depleted faster as well. She had woken up so early this morning. Besides having drunk some water, she had not had anything to eat at all, causing her to almost collapse from hunger. Moreover, she had just gotten such a great shock from the little snake, which had further drained her out quite a bit, which just made her even more hungry now. Chapter 93. 3. Did this fella just fart? Qin was already able to fast for 1 month straight, and she would be fine even if she had no food or drink in that period but just some elixirs to replenish her spirit energy. The others in the group would not be able to withstand that, however, and asking them to go hungry like that would not be a solution. Thinking about that, she then got up to her feet. In that case, I'll go take a look nearby to see whether there is anything edible. All of you stay here and wait. Don't go running off on your own. Sis, I'll go with you. It's too dangerous to go alone. Qin Bei climbed to his feet as well when he heard that. Qin however shook her head. I'll be fine, you just stay here, as it would be even more dangerous to leave just the 2 of them here. I'll be back very quickly. Upon saying that, she then turned around and quickly disappeared from sight. Qin Bei did not even have the chance to say anything as he watched her disappear in the distance. The youth's handsome countenance creased up, albeit so faintly it was almost unnoticeable. He did not know whether he was mistaken, but from the moment they came into Hades Canyon, he seemed to feel that there was a pair of eyes constantly watching them, which made him feel highly uneasy, and that was why he was so worried about Qin Yu. His good-looking pair of eyes then turned to glance icily at the downcast Yen Shiro. This girl is just so troublesome. On the other side, Qin Yu cast her gaze slowly over the area in front, her eyes appraising the surroundings. This Hades Canyon is really rather special. It is called a canyon, but she had not seen that many rocks but just a sparse and empty place. Wonder where all those spirit beasts usually roam in here. She was immersed in her thoughts when a cold wind suddenly blew past her ear and a tiny figure flashed past her right before her eyes, so quickly that she had not been able to clearly see what it was. What was that? A spirit beast? Quick, mistress, pursue it quick. Don't let that escape. At that moment, Zhang Mai's voice suddenly rang out teasingly. He had just woken up and had come to encounter such an interesting incident. Qin Yu was puzzled. Why? That fella just stole something from you. Qin Yu's face was surprised a moment as her hand subconsciously reached to feel her hip, only to find the medicine bag with the mosquito repellent she had made all empty, and that all the elixirs in there were gone. The corner of her mouth twitched. That was meant to keep away the bugs, you know. Although the smell is rather enticing, but mistakenly ingesting it will rumble the stomach. Which unfortunate little spirit beast could be so blind? Choosing to ignore that little interlude, her eyes darted around in search and finally saw quite a number of red fruits hanging high up in a tall spire-shaped tree. They were rather large in size, and they looked quite similar to apples. But at that height, Qin Yu was still contemplating whether she should climb up that tree to pick the fruits when another cold gust of wind whizzed past, and that lightning-quick figure almost crashed right into her, but she managed to dodge nimbly to the side. In the end, that poor little figure crashed good and proper right into the tree just behind her with a heavy thud, the sound so loud it even caused her to cringe. She saw that it was a tiny animal that was completely white, highly fleshly and cuddly with sharp-pointed ears, its tail round like a ball, looking both like a cat and a rabbit at the same time. It was probably dazed from the knock, as the little fella's four limbs remained splayed out upon the tree, not moving at all for a good while. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qin Yu arched up an eyebrow and hesitated a moment before she walked over to it. In the end, before she had even gotten close, she heard a sound going put, completely out of place in this quiet and silent night here, which was accompanied by a most unbelievably incapacitating odor. Qin Yu was completely shocked. Had she been mistaken with what she just heard? Did that fella just? Did it just fart? Qin Yu wrinkled up her brows, her slender hand quickly snapping up to cover her nose. The smell was truly powerfully pungent. Chapter 94. 1. Meat to eat. Qin Yu's face was one of undisguised contempt as she took several steps back. And at that moment, that white little ball then mournfully slid itself down from the tree, and then turned to face her, its large azure blue eyes that looked as if they had just been cleaned looking aggrievedly at her. There was no need to mention just how forlorn a look its small little face was, its tiny paws coming to carry out an action that was so hilarious to see. Qin Yu lifted an eyebrow up calmly and looked down at the little creature from her higher vantage point. It was looking rather indignant and its two tiny paws held its small little bottom, but despite that, the farts were still sounding out in incessant mini explosions one after another, rocking that tiny little body. Finally, Qin Yu could not hold herself back from laughing seeing the little creature's antics, its tiny face looking so mournful like there was nothing worth living for in life anymore. Qin Yu then tossed a black-colored elixir over. Nah, this is an antidote. Eat it and you'll be fine. Hearing that, the little creature then released its paws that were holding its bottom tightly, and picked up the elixir and popped it into its mouth straight down its throat. After a while, the urge to fart continuously then disappeared. Next time see if you'll still dare to nick people's things to eat. This is a good example of suffering the consequences of your own actions. Qin Yu said with a smile, not caring whether it understood her. She then tapped the tip of her toes on the ground lightly and leapt up into the tree to pick some of those fruits. She took a whiff. Most sweet and fresh-smelling fruits are usually edible. But it was clear to see that those fruits would not be able to fill one's stomach, so should she hunt for a spirit beast or two for them to roast and eat? Her gaze then swung over to the tiny spirit beast looking at her with its large eyes. Forget it. That tiny little one would not even be enough for one person. But it looks rather beautiful though. With its big round intelligent blue eyes, it's really exceptionally adorable, and this is my first time seeing such a creature, a rabbit that does not look like a rabbit, a fox that does not look like a fox. She then took a couple of steps, about to go see if there were any signs of spirit beasts around, and she came to sense some movement behind her. She turned around and saw that little thing following right in her footsteps. Seeing that she had stopped, it also halted its step, and just looked at her innocently with its large clear eyes. Qin Yu laughed softly and asked, "Why are you following me? Are you hungry?" As she spoke, she gave a couple of the fruits she had just picked to it. The little creature stretched out its tiny paws and hugged the fruits within its short paws, and took a crunchy bite before its mouth began to chew vigorously. But in the instant that Qin Yu lifted a foot to leave, it grabbed up the fruits in its stubby paws again and went following with a pitter-patter of its legs. Qin Yu did not know what to make of it. What does it really want? Just eat those fruits you have. Don't follow me. I did not come here to play. Go back to where you came from and be careful that you do not get preyed upon by others. You're so small that you aren't even enough to fill the gaps between their teeth. Understand? Qin Yu said as her eyebrow arched up, pausing in between each word as she preached. The little creature seemed to be highly intelligent and it looked like it could understand what she was saying. So immediately after Qin Yu said those words, she just turned herself around and strode away. Mistress, I can't help but feel that there is something unusual about that little fella. Zhang Mai's doubtful voice suddenly sounded. It felt like he had suddenly come to remember something but he just could not put it into words. What is unusual about it? Qin Yu asked casually. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. From what she could see, it was just a spirit beast that was more attractive looking than others, and a little more intelligent. Zhang Mai was deep in thought for a moment before he then said slowly, I seem to have felt an aura that I am rather familiar with. Qin Yu did not fully understand that and she was just about to ask for clarification when a gentle and youthful voice that was tinged with a certain sadness rang out behind her. And under that soundless and silent night, it sent a chill running through Qin Yu, causing her back to break out in cold sweat. Was she hearing things in here? Chapter 94. 2. Meat to eat. Little Burrow, did you just hear a child's voice or not? Qin Yu asked softly. Luckily, she had Little Burrow accompanying her, otherwise hearing such a voice on such a dark night like this would really be too frightening. Yet, Zhang Mai answered in an equally cautious voice. I thought I heard a child's voice calling out. Mother. You don't want me anymore. Boo-hoo-hoo. This time, the voice sounded highly mournful which then burst straight into tears, filled with endless sorrow, highly heart-wrenching to hear. Qin Yu's entire body stiffened up. Mistress. Why not? You turn around to take a look. Zhang Mai inquired in a soft voice. Don't you know that I am terrified of baby spirits the most? Do you want to scare your mistress to death? Qin Yu said, her face drained of all color. The only weakness she had her entire life, the thing she feared the most, were dark aggrieved spirits of babies. When such a perfectly fresh life was shrouded over by dark death, turning them into aggrieved spirits filled with terrifying rage, just how painful and stifling would it make one feel? How do you know that it's a baby spirit? Can't it just be a lost child? Zhang Mai retorted. Qin Yu rolled her eyes. Would a child from any normal family come running out to such a dangerous place to play? Are you stupid or do you think I'm dumb? After saying that, she took a deep breath. Don't turn around, don't look, don't listen, mother. Don't abandon Meatball. Something soft and fleshy suddenly grabbed onto her ankle, holding back her footsteps. Qin Yu's body shook and she lowered her head to look, only to discover that the round and pudgy little beast was clinging on to her leg for dear life, its tiny body even trembling intermittently, like it was sobbing spasmodically. Seeing that there was no reaction from her after a while, it then lifted its head, its beautiful large eyes brimming over with tears as they flowed down incessantly. The adorable little face was weeping so hard that it seemed it might collapse at any moment, its slightly open mouth revealing tiny sharp teeth as it whimpered pitifully to say, "Mother. Meatball will not be greedy anymore. Don't abandon Meatball." Qin Yu stood frozen in her spot, her face blank, unable to recover from the shock. Qin Yu then spoke inwardly, "Little Burrow, are you seeing this? The little thing can actually talk." "I see it." Zhang Mai replied, the expression on his face wooden. "It being able to speak is not the critical point here. The most important thing is, Mistress, it called you mother. Who did you have this little thing with? Have your big fat head?" Qin Yu gnawed out those few words with her teeth tightly clenched together. It was probably because she had suffered such a great shock earlier and was now completely befuddled by this scene before her. Qin Yu's rage rose up within her and she finally shouted out those words in a roar. The little fella by her foot who was still wrecked by its heaving sobs was startled a moment before it pouted, looking highly hurt. Meatball is not fat. Although it was rotund, but it wasn't exactly fat. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Having heard it say Meatball so many times, Qin Yu cast her gaze onto it before she grabbed on the little fella's neck and picked it up off the ground, bringing it right in front of her face to look at it straight in the eyes. "What in the devil is this Meatball you keep mentioning? Meatball is not a devil. Meatball is me." The little beast's blue eyes blinked pitifully in innocence. "You are called Meatball?" Qin Yu was taken aback for a moment, before she burst into laughter, almost unable to breathe. "Ha ha ha. Who is so ingenious to give you such a name? Can it be any tackier?" But after Qin Yu picked up the creature, she then came to discover that though the little thing looked so round on the surface, it was in fact because of its fluffy fur that made it look like a ball of snow, and to realize that it did not even weigh 2 taels, extremely light. Chapter 94. 3. Meat to eat. The little beast was very clever and it realized that Qin Yu was making fun of it, so it pawed the air in front of it a couple of times and then said in a tiny voice, "Because Meatball likes to eat meat and wants to eat it every day. That is why Mother gave Meatball the name Meatball. Has Mother forgotten all about it?" "Me?" Qin Yu was bewildered as she pointed her finger at her own nose. "Little one, you've mistaken me for someone else. I do not know you at all." As she said that, she released her grip as she put the little creature down on the ground. She then said to it with a stern face, "I'm warning you. Do not follow me anymore. I am not your mother, and if continue to pester me, do you believe that I will throw you right into the nests of the other spirit beasts, where you will be gobbled right up? Don't believe." The little beast shook its head to say and stuck its tongue out impishly. Mother has tried to scare Meatball like this before, but it always ends up having all of them run away when they see Meatball. "Oh." Qin Yu arched up an eyebrow, thinking it rather funny. "A small little thing like you still dares to brag so much." "Meatball isn't bragging," Meatball said with a pout, looking like it wanted to defend itself. But seeing that cold and impatient look on Mother, it did not dare to continue to prattle on too much and just clamped its mouth shut. Qin Yu could not be bothered to continue arguing with the little creature. She had come out for quite a while, and if she doesn't go back soon, little Belle might get worried. Mother! Wait for Meatball. The figure in front suddenly halted, and the little beast almost crashed right into her. I told you not to follow me. A twitch throbbed at Qin Yu's temple, like she was silently holding back the rage that was threatening to explode. If you continue to follow, I might just roast you and eat you up. She had not been able to find much to eat. A chill ran through Meatball's rotund body, and it then said softly, Mother, Meatball can help you find food. Can you bring Meatball with you? With such a gentle and obedient-sounding voice, its azure blue eyes staring unblinking at her, filled with cautious anticipation and unrestrained adoration. It looked so pure and innocent, like one would be able to see through what it was thinking with just a single glance. Qin Yu's heart unconsciously softened. I really am not your mother. You are. Meatball remembers mother's scent. The elixirs mother cultivates are the yummiest. Oh heavens! It was such an adorable little thing. She suddenly became worried that if it encountered people with ill intentions, would it be deceived and end up roasted and eaten? Qin Yu sighed, and seemingly helplessly, she reached out her hands and said, Come, I'll carry you. Meatball's tiny body quivered with joy, and its beautiful large eyes became wet, looking like tears were going to fall the very next moment. Qin Yu creased up her brows and said in a low tone, If you cry, I will dump you here. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. At almost the same moment her voice fell, the little fella scuttled like a gust of wind into her arms, its soft and warm tiny body plopped obediently within, not moving an inch. Its tiny paws clutched her clothes tightly, seemingly afraid that it would be abandoned. The corners of Qin Yu's lips lifted slightly as she raised a hand to ruffle the little beast's head hard, moving back in the direction she had come. In her arms, Meatball's large eyes closed from the comforting touch, an expression of absolute bliss on its face. Mother, Meatball finally found you. The night breeze rushed past, which blew away its soft and faint whisper. On the other side, Qin Bei was keeping track of the time in his heart, and when he still did not see Qin Yu come back, he could not help but grew anxious. He stood up thinking to go look for her, and when Yan Shiro, who was rather timid, saw that he looked like he was going to leave, she immediately asked, Where are you going? Qin Bei was already getting rather impatient with her and really could not be bothered with her, but at that moment, Yan Shiro's eyes suddenly grew wide with terror. What? What is that? Chapter 95. 1. Roast suckling pig. Under the indistinct shadows of the row of trees not too far from them, something seemed to be shifting its way lightly towards them and had carelessly bumped into a tree trunk, causing a scatter of leaves to fall from it. The expression on Qin Bei's face changed slightly. Could it be a spirit beast that had been drawn to them by the firelight? After a while, that body of that thing in the shadows then slowly stuck its body out, revealing itself. It was a great spiked hog whose body was as thick as 3 grown men, with sharp spiky quills running the entire length of his body, where even its sharp snout was densely covered with short tiny spikes. It looked highly powerful, and if it ran into a person with those spikes, that person would have more holes than a honeycomb. At that moment, the great spiked hog was staring at them with its pair of huge wide eyes, its open mouth dripping with drool as it panted heavily with its coarse breath, looking very hungry and had just sighted highly delicious prey. Qin Bei clenched up his fists unconsciously as he watched its movements closely. Finally, after staring them down, the great spiked hog's massive body, which had looked somewhat clumsy, suddenly charged speedily towards the foremost youth in front, the 2 long sharp spikes at the top of its head glinting coldly in the night, seemingly seeking to bore right through the human before it. Qin Bei's gaze darkened and he hurriedly dodged to the side, causing the great spiked hog to miss completely and crash into a tree right behind. 2 deep holes appeared in the thick tree trunk before it then collapsed and fell. Seeing that its attack had failed and that the human had actually been able to evade its attack, the great spike hog became frustrated and it let out a couple of grunts through its mouth before its eyes grew more vicious. But the tall and elegant youth standing before it looked calm and unruffled, not showing the slightest tinge of fear or terror in his demeanor. The great spiked hog had attained intelligence and was capable of a human's most rudimentary level of thought. It was a 5th-level spirit beast and it was almost at the same level as an average expert pugilist among humans. But the difference was that beast species possessed higher attack and defense powers than humans, so if they were to pit themselves against humans at the same level, they would be able to slaughter the opponent despite the similar cultivation levels. But with this youth before its eyes, it could not comprehend the extent of his cultivation, but it was instead feeling slightly intimidated from the aura exuding from the youth's body. After contemplation, the great spiked hog then decided to change its target onto the 2 weak and frail girls beside the fire. When the 2 girls saw the massive spirit beast that looked so fierce and malicious, their faces immediately grew pale and they clutched each other tightly. But the spirit beast just paced around about 10 meters away from them, and did not come any closer. Of course they were not aware that the fire Qingyu had left behind had not only illuminated the area, but was also able to ward off a spirit beast's attack. The great spiked hog was not dumb. Even though it did not know why the color of the fire was different from regular fire, but its innate animal instinct warned it of the danger, and that it must not go close. Finding no way to get to its prey, the great spiked hog that had gone hungry for days and had finally been able to sneak out in search for food was suddenly feeling greatly infuriated. It took 2 steps forward and then charged towards the 2 girls in rage with a roar. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. With that roar, the 2 sisters suddenly found themselves in a highly dangerous predicament. The 2 of them had been scared frozen stiff at the sight of such an enormous and terrifying spirit beast, and upon hearing that rage-filled roar, a chill immediately shot through their bodies that enabled them to run a distance away from the fire. And it was that action that gave the great spiked hog an opening to strike. The nimble body shot forward speedily in that instant, its large mouth that was exuding a stench wide open, attacking with a vicious bite. Eek! Help! Chapter 95. 2. Roasted suckling pig. The sharp and terrified shrill shrieks of the girls rang out under the quiet night, startling the flocks of birds hidden within the trees to flap their wings and take flight, which attracted the attention of many restless spirit beasts. Seeing that scene, the eyes of the gently handsome youth flashed with a glint, but he did not make any moves and merely stood watching with a cold gaze, seeming like he had no intention of moving to help. In actual fact, he had detested those 2 girls for a very long time. Whenever he and Qingyu were bullied and berated by Mo Han Yen, those 2 girls would never fail to come trample upon them further, adding salt to the wound gleefully, finding delight from their misery. He had told himself back then, that the day would come he would make all of them pay the price. On that side, Yen Shiro and Yen Shiwu were so terror-struck all color had drained from their faces. Yen Shiwu was doing a little better as she was able to at least close her eyes from the horror, but Yen Shiro had lost her mind from fright, screaming incessantly, Don't come any closer. Qing Bei. Save me, Qing Bei. Eek. Don't come any closer. Qing Bei lowered his good-looking pair of eyes, and slowly turned his body around. To have people die an unexpected death while out on training in Hades Canyon isn't really something that was totally unheard of. In the worst-case scenario, they still had the jade token that Qin Fong had given to them, which would enable them to leave this place in one piece once they crush it. But if they are adamant on not leaving and an accident occurs, that will still be rather understandable. But for him to go save them? Ha! He really isn't that magnanimous. The great spiked hog's great speed had already brought it over the 10-pace distance to come right in front of them. At that moment, Yen Shiro fainted away from fright while Yen Shiwu had her eyes closed, resigned to fate as she awaited the arrival of death. Just as Qing Bei was about to leave the place to go look for Qingyu, the great spiked hog behind him suddenly howled loudly in pain. Qin Bei was surprised a moment before he turned around to look, and he saw Yan Shiro and Yan Shiwu, who were to have been gobbled up by the great spiked hog, suddenly had their bodies ablaze with flames. The incredibly heat from the blazing flames could be felt even through the great spiked hog's impenetrable skin that was hard as steel. It seared through every single part of its body, a stinging pain that was more agonizing than death, and the only thing it could do was roll itself maniacally on the ground as it howled. But no matter what it did, the flames did not diminish in the slightest but grew in intensity instead, engulfing the great spike hog in a massive ball of flames, an absolutely astounding sight. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qin Bei squinted his eyes and subconsciously peered further into the distance. A figure in white was slowly walking towards them, the bright light from the fire reflecting off that countenance of peerless beauty, that looked as mesmerizing as an alluring seductress. I was just thinking about it, and here it is delivered straight to me. I was thinking where I should go look for food, and here I have a roasted suckling pig fall right into my lap. Qin Yu said in a comforted tone. She then lifted an eyebrow when she saw the youth's dark expression, and she asked with a smile, "What's wrong?" Qin Bei did not say anything but just let his gaze fall upon the completely roasted great spiked hog that had fallen silent before he glanced at the sisters who had fainted and were unconscious at the side. I had thought that they would become the spirit beast's dinner today. Qin Yu understood what was going through the youth's mind, and she reached a hand out to pat the youth on his shoulder reassuringly. What's past is past, and although they were indeed just so detestable before, but they had not done anything really so heinous that went against the heavens. You can seek repayment for all the misdeeds they had done in the past, but with 2 lives at stake here, it is no joking matter. Having spoken up to this point, Qin Yu then paused a moment before she continued, if they were to have died, you will not come to feel good about it at all, and might even be overcome with guilt. Don't I know you well enough yet? Chapter 95. 3. Roast suckling pig. This foolish little brother of hers, usually looked rather distant and aloof as a person, but was actually an incredibly kind and gentle soul at heart. Not to mention that the 2 sisters had lived under the same roof as him for so many years, even if it was just a stranger, wanting him to just watch and not lift a finger to save someone would be a very hard thing for him to do. He would still not be able to answer to his conscience. Qin Bei's tightly clenched fingers then finally relaxed slowly. I get it now. Qin Yu's powerful and mysterious elixir fire had properly cooked the 5th-level great spike hog without much trouble, and the flesh of the great spiked hog had become succulent after being roasted. She took a few steps forward and thrust her dagger into the top of the great spiked hog's head to slice it open before she retrieved the blackish-purple-colored core that was steaming slightly. Luckily, core crystals are not that easily affected by heat, or it would have melted into nothing from the blaze. Looking at the massive-sized great spiked hog, it could be seen that its girth had been largely due to its thick fur that covered its body, and now that it had been thoroughly roasted, it had shrunk significantly. Qin Bei's face held a highly indescribable expression as he watched the young lady skillfully carve off the great spiked hog's hide, and slicing its body open with her dagger. What are you doing? Of course we're gonna eat it. Aren't you hungry? Qin Yu replied as she rolled her eyes at him. This thing is edible. Just don't bother what species of pig it really is, but it is still a pig after all. Haven't you eaten roasted suckling pig before? You're in for a treat today. Qin Yu said earnestly as she threw the youth a wink. Yan Shiro and Yan Shiwu, who had fainted away from fright, were just beginning to stir awake. When they saw that Qin Yu had come back, they were highly delighted, but when they saw her busily cutting up some enormous-sized creature, they then asked in puzzlement. This is... You're awake. Qin Yu said with a smile. Apologies. I took a little longer out there but came across something for us to eat. So hurry up and fill your stomach, and we can continue on our way when we're done. As she spoke, Qin Yu stuck her dagger into a piece of meat that was smeared over with spices and handed it over to Yan Shiro. Yen Shiro was absolutely famished and the great shock she had suffered had drained her completely. She took the meat and immediately gobbled on it greedily. Tastes so good. What kind of a meat is it? It's so fragrant. Qinbei watched her gorge herself and he immediately felt his stomach turn. If she knew that it was the meat of the spirit beast that had very nearly eaten her up, it was wondered whether she would still be enjoying it so much. This? Roasted suckling pig. It's good, right? Qin Yu said with a laugh. That's right, I also have some fruits here. All of Yen Shiro's attention had been fully drawn onto the delicious roast, so how could she possibly bother herself with those fruits? She did not even give them a glance. But Yen Shiwu, who always had a lighter palate, did not really like such greasy meat, and so she took a couple of the fruits and started taking small bites out of them. On the other side, Qinbei was also eating the fruits, and when his eyes spotted the hazy-faced Yen Shiro, for some unknown reason, a wicked sense of humor suddenly rose up inside him. Eat slowly. No one is fighting with you for it. That is meat from a 5th-level spirit beast, and I think eating it will definitely be very good for you. Qinbei said emotionlessly. Hearing that, Qin Yu found it rather funny but did not give the game away. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, what kind of a 5th-level spirit beast? Yen Shiro asked as she chewed vigorously. It's the very same beast that just attacked us, which very nearly tore you into shreds, meat from the great spiked hog. It's such a pitiful end for it to be eaten up by you. The youth shook his head as he spoke, looking highly regretful. Yen Shiro's chewing motion suddenly froze in place before her eyes stared woodenly at the chunk of half-eaten meat in her hand. In the next second, her eyes unconsciously caught sight of something glinting under the light at the side, and she saw that it was the spiky hide of the great spiked hog. Bleh. Chapter 96. 1. The entrance that disappeared because of what Qinbei said. Yen Shiro found everything she ate tasteless for the next several days. Towards that, Qin Yu was also rather helpless and could not do anything else but to stuff the remaining great spiked hog meat into the dimensional space she carried with her. At that moment, the tiny little beast was also inside, snoring roaringly, and upon smelling the meat's fragrance, it shivered and came awake, its eyes shining brightly. After getting Qin Yu's permission, the little beast then physically proved one thing to her. To never be deceived by a person's outer appearance, and the exact same thing applied to beasts as well. Qin Yu stared with eyes wide and mouth agape when she saw the little thing completely inhale a spirit beast that was several hundred times bigger than itself. Its stomach did not show the slightest sign of bloating at all, and it looked like it could really still eat. Qin Yu did not know what to say. That's a bottomless pit there. She was suddenly feeling regret. Is she supposed to hunt a spirit beast every day from now on for the little fella? Fortunately, they were only going to be staying in here for 10 days. If it was for months, she was afraid that there might not be enough spirit beasts in the Hades Canyon to feed the little beast. No wonder it's called Meatball. It's a total carnivore. And its mistress didn't know it well at all. On the other side, at the fringe of Hades Canyon, quite a number of people had gathered there and were currently discussing about something in low voices. It was not known what a burly and towering man among them heard when he fell to the ground with a sorrowful expression. Heavens! How could something like this happen? I have just this one child. If I had known, I would not have allowed him to willfully go with the others for rigorous training. My younger brother is still in there. Are we really unable to get in? You can see that we are not even able to find the entrance. How are we going to get inside? All these people lived in places not too far away from the Hades Canyon, and someone heard a great commotion from inside during the night, and he had all come running to check the situation out. In the end, his soul was almost frightened right out of his body when he saw the scene, and he quickly went running back to gather more people. The Hades Canyon's entrance was a tall and large hole formed from the trees, and the entire place was filled with many gigantic ancient trees, twisted in many strange and unusual shapes. The entrance was almost shrouded in a persistent and impenetrable fog that would only dissipate at the Mao hour, which would gather again when the sky turned bright, a highly amazing phenomenon. And the sky had already brightened at that moment with the sun about to rise, but the always present fog was nowhere in sight and the hole in the trees that was the entrance was gone. There wasn't even any sign of the gigantic trees, and in their place, it was just flat and even ground, completely smooth. It was as if they had disappeared into thin air, without any warning. What are we supposed to do now? Who can save my son? The burly man buried his face in his hands and cried without restraint, the pain in his cries causing the hearts of everyone around to wince. The man was really rather pitiful. His wife had died from complications during labor and he played both a father and a mother to his son while bringing him up to such an age. Fortunately his son had displayed significant talents and stood a good chance of being accepted into the three great sects, but now, he was to come receive such horrendous news. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. No one knew how to comfort him, but no matter what they said, his son would not come back. Right at that moment, the sound of footsteps suddenly sounded and everyone turned to look. Could it be another group of youngsters coming here to the Hades Canyon for training? They saw two tall male figures walking towards them from afar, one wearing red with devilishly handsome looks, his upslanted and expressive peach blossom-like eyes dazzling to see, so beautiful he did not look mortal. The other man looked highly mysterious, dressed in a lavish and noble purple robe, the exquisite features of his countenance so elegant he looked like he had fully received the favor of the Creator himself. His pair of violet eyes were like the most pure and precious purple gems, the slightest ripple from them able to capture a person's very soul in an instant. His lips were curled up into a faint smiling arc, but the compelling aura around his body made people not dare to go close. Chapter 96. 2. The entrance that disappeared. For two such young and outstanding-looking men to be coming to Hades Canyon at this time, the people there could roughly guess their intentions. Although the men looked like people not to be trifled with, one of them still came to say very cautiously, "Young men, are you intending to go into Hades Canyon? No matter what you came for, it's better that you leave quickly." Those two men who just arrived were Lu Junyao and Bai Zhiyan. When he heard that Bai Zhiyan had hidden the level 11 lightning blaze unicorn inside Hades Canyon and that Qin Yu was undergoing rigorous training in there, Lu Junyao immediately became highly restless. What a joke! A level 11 spirit beast. No, it could be termed to be a divine beast already. Not only would it possess exceptional intelligence, it would also be able to instantaneously kill a top-skilled expert from the mid-level realm. The lightning blaze unicorn is capable of wielding both the lightning and fire elements, and as its powerful bloodline runs within its body, it will be able to transform into human form when it advances to the 12th level, unlike regular spirit beasts who would need to wait till they reach level 15. If Qin Yu and her group were to encounter it, that would purely be sending themselves to their deaths. When he heard those words of advice being said to them, Bai Zhiyan immediately raised an eyebrow and inquired, "Why?" Because quite a number of people were gathered at that place and they were blocking the view, Bai Zhiyan could not see anything in front. Hence, he was naturally unaware of the situation. When the people saw that his demeanor looked rather insistent, they all then shook their heads with a sigh and parted to make way for him. Bai Zhiyan was immediately stunned, his beautiful peach blossom-like eyes staring in shock. What? What is going on here? Where's the hole? How did it turn into this flat and bare land? It was Lu Junyao's first time here and he was naturally unaware of the reason Bai Zhiyan was so shocked. He then went on to ask indifferently, "What? The hole into Hades Canyon has disappeared." A corner of Bai Zhiyan's lips twitched. Not only has it disappeared, the entire place has turned into flat and bare land, and there wasn't a single sign of the place left behind. What do you mean the hole disappeared? Lu Junyao cast his glance upon him. Would it grow legs and go running off? I would really like to know as well. Bai Zhiyan said, feeling helpless. He then turned to the people gathered there. When did the entry hole become like this? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, just last night. I heard the commotion coming from here as I lived the closest, and by the time I came running, the hole was already gone. A short-statured man said. Bai Jiyan's eyes narrowed and an idea of what might have happened popped into his head, but he quickly brushed it off. That cannot be possible, right? What are you thinking? Beside him, Lu Junyao could not help but ask when he saw Bai Jiyan shaking his head in disbelief. Junyao, I don't know if you have heard of this before. When a divine beast undergoes a change in form, it is a transformation that is equivalent to being completely reborn, and their powers would increase exponentially, which could directly cause its surroundings to change as well. Bai Jiyan explained worriedly, and the emotion in his eyes looked rather complicated. But that fella just advanced to the 11th level barely 2 months ago, so how could it possibly advance in level again so quickly? That would really be quite scary. It must be known that it was a lot more difficult for spirit beasts to advance a level, where they might even not be able to advance once in several years. But if this had really been brought upon by that fella advancing into the next level which caused Hades Canyon to change as well, that would really be some rather maniacal progression there. Chapter 96. 3. The entrance that disappeared. Lu Junyao's eyes flashed sharply. You are saying that thing advanced another level? Highly possible. Bai Jiyan nodded like he was in pain. Whether that is true or not, we'll know once we go take a look. Lu Junyao snorted lightly in derision, and his slender fingers immediately pulled at the air in front of him, to tear a dimensional hole right in front of him, that formed into a black vortex. Bai Jiyan subconsciously gulped. You dare to do something so strange and unusual right in front of so many people, aren't you afraid that you'll be seen? Seeing that Lu Junyao's body had already disappeared into the black hole, Bai Jiyan quickly gathered back his thoughts and followed him inside. The next second, the vortex in the black hole then immediately shrank, gradually closing up completely. Everyone there was speechless. What just happened? Where did those two demons come from? On the other side, Qin Yu and her group continued to make their way forward in Hades Canyon. This was indeed one of the most dangerous and mysterious places around. When they had been making their way forward earlier, they saw that they were in a dark forest, and there were gigantic trees with thick and prickly branches everywhere. But after walking for a period of time, all the trees had suddenly disappeared, to be replaced by boundless and barren plains. The soil under their feet was not moist and soft like before, but had become exceptionally hard, like it had not been nourished by rain for a very long time, so dry that the ground was filled with a dense maze of crack lines. The cracks were so wide that a careless step might have them get their feet stuck in them. It was not known how long they had walked when they saw that the dark sky was slowly turning bright, allowing them to see that the barren plains were littered with many boulders. At a glance, it seemed like only towering boulders stood upon the plains and there were no other living things around. Yen Shiro suddenly stumbled and twisted her foot slightly, immediately letting out a cry in pain. Sheesh! What kind of a damned place is this? The few of them paused in their steps to look at her. Seeing her seated on the ground and about to remove her shoe and sock to check on her injury, Qin Yu raised an eyebrow and said in a rather chill voice, better not look at it and just continue walking. If something comes burrowing out from underground suddenly, it would be too late even if you run. The moment Yen Shiro heard that something might just burrow itself out from underground, she quickly got to her feet, kept staring into the crack with trepidation. Qin Yu laughed softly and then turned around to continue to lead the way forward, her gaze surveying the surroundings on all sides. Looking at it, something did not feel right about the place. She did not even see a single blade of grass but just so many large rocks blocking their way. She was deep in thought when her body suddenly paused and she suddenly halted her footsteps. Sis, what's wrong? Qin Bei was right behind her and seeing her stop, he asked in bewilderment. Qin Yu's eyes slowly narrowed up and she turned her body to stare at a slim-shaped boulder behind them, the corners of her lips rising up slightly. "Do you see that piece of boulder there?" Hearing that, the few of them then followed her gaze and looked, but did not understand what she was talking about. "What is wrong with that piece of rock? There are so many pieces of rocks just like that everywhere. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. It has followed us for quite a distance, from the moment we stepped onto these plains, it had always been around." Qin Yu said in a soft voice. Hearing what she said, Yan Shiro then felt a chill run up her spine and she then said weakly. "No, you can't be serious. Could you have been mistaken? You can trust the memory I possess." Qin Yu said, throwing her an indifferent glance. She then made a signal with her eyes to the youth. It was time for him to make a move. Qin Bei immediately understood. His lightning summoning palm had improved very rapidly over the recent period and this would be the best time for him to test its power. With that thought, Qin Bei's eyes grew dark and he transformed his hand into a blade that was imbued with dark purple electrifying light. He slashed his hand viciously towards the boulder and a loud explosion burst out immediately. The boulder exploded and a shadow inside pounced straight at Qin Bei. Chapter 97. 1. Demonic Centipede. Qin Yu saw that long bright red creature and her eyes widened as she stared. Seeing it charging straight at the youth in attack, she quickly shouted loudly, "Dodge quickly." And upon hearing those words, though Qin Bei who had been prepared to take on the creature did not understand why, but having gotten used to placing his trust in Qin Yu, he quickly dodged to the side. But the creature's speed was just incredible. Its body that was tens of meters long retreated back in an instant to straighten itself out flat. A stamen-like part of its body at its mouth then quivered slightly, before a thick gooey liquid sprayed out. Qin Bei was unable to avoid it in time and a good half of his shoulder was hit. Having suffered absolutely heart-wrenching pain when he underwent treatment for his crippled legs before, he had developed quite a high tolerance for pain. But getting shot with that strange liquid, it had caused him to immediately cry out in agony, and fall to the ground. "Little Bei." The expression on Qin Yu's face sank. Ever since Qin Bei came to regain the use of his legs, she had not allowed him to be injured again, but he was now seriously wounded by this creature here. When that creature had leapt out from the rock, she had immediately felt that something did not feel right. With a full bright red body, several tens of meters in length, its mouth with something that looked like a flower stamen and its dense number of feet, it was clearly the demonic centipede that appeared only in deserts, a creature whose entire body was covered in lethal poison and the venomous fluid it spits out from its mouth was the most poisonous among poisons. But the demonic centipede usually resides deep underground in the deserts. How did it come to be hidden within a boulder, and had followed them for such a long distance? The fear still lingering, she would not be able to decipher the reason for that no matter how smart she was. Before her, she saw that Qin Bei was lying there on the ground with his eyes tightly shut, already fallen unconscious. She could only temporarily seal his meridians with her golden needles to stop his blood from circulating, to prevent the venom from spreading over a large area. She turned around to discover that the demonic centipede was initiating an attack upon Yan Shiro and Yan Shiwu. Fortunately, although the two sisters did not possess very high levels of cultivation, they were quite adept at running away. Though they were screaming their heads off from terror, the demonic centipede was not able to catch them at that moment, its long body dragging its speed down by quite a bit. Qin Yu's brows knitted up. She had been just beside that creature just now, but it had seemed like the creature did not see her at all but had gone to attack the other two people instead of striking at her. Why? A soft snigger suddenly sounded beside her. Zhong Mai had suddenly appeared out of the blue, his long gold and silver eyes highly dazzling. He then winked at her and said, "Mistress, not only will that fella not attack you, but even if you stand right in front of it, you will still be safe and sound." Why? Here. Watch. Zhang Mai smiled mischievously before his gold and silver figure shot at the speed of light to suddenly appear right in front of the demonic centipede that was relentlessly pursuing the two young ladies, standing there without moving an inch, his hands behind his back. Qin Yu's eyes widened in disbelief as she stared, when she saw the demonic centipede actually went around the golden-haired youth, before continuing to pursue the two girls. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, how did that happen? Qin Yu was a little stunned as she looked at the youth who had come running back. Did you turn yourself invisible just now? Under most circumstances, in order to avoid trouble, whenever Zhang Mai came out to move around, Qin Yu would ask him to make himself invisible and must not appear before people. It was when he did not conceal himself, that others would then be able to see him. I did not. The youth opened his palms before him in innocence. Then you released your aura to threaten it? Definitely not. Zhang Mai pouted defensively as he looked at her. My foolish mistress, you're usually very smart. Why have you suddenly dumbed down today? Chapter 97. 2. Demonic Centipede. That fella doesn't have eyes or a nose, so it obviously can't see or smell to detect an enemy. But as its body is closely stuck to the ground, it is able to accurately locate the enemy through any movement on the ground. As you had not moved earlier, it was completely unaware of your presence, and when I suddenly appeared in its path earlier, it just went around me as it had thought that I was a boulder. Boulder? After Zhang Mai's explanation, Qin Yu finally understood why it had thought the golden-haired youth was a boulder. The environment here is strange and queer, and one cannot just use their eyes to see the place. All the rocks and boulders here had suddenly come out from underground, and that was why it had thought that I was a boulder that just shot out from underground. So I see. Qin Yu nodded, and she then ravaged the youth's head violently with her hand. Not too shabby, little burro. You're almost a walking encyclopedia. To think that you know this as well, you're truly your mistress' personal security blanket. Having his head ruffled so suddenly in a way that could almost be termed as lovingly, and being praised so highly, a red flush unconsciously tinted Zhang Mai's cheeks. That I am able to be of assistance to my mistress, little burro, is very happy. After a moment of bashfulness, the youth then opened his mouth to say in a serious tone, Mistress, you'll still have to be careful. Although that fella is stupid, it is still a peak 7th level spirit beast that is about to advance into the 8th level. You must kill it before it advances, or it will become more powerful when it reaches the 8th level. Peak 7th level spirit beast. Do they really have to be that lucky? Qin Yu cast a worried look at the youth on the ground. She has to deal with it as quickly as possible. Otherwise, leaving her foolish younger brother in that condition could become very dangerous. She really regrets not bringing Little Snow along this time, as Little Snow would only need to suck out all the poison and he'll be fine. Little burro, watch Little Bay for me. I fear that there might be other creatures nearby. Qin Yu stood up after giving her order. Watching the two girls who were almost going to collapse from running, she then said in a voice that was not very loud but was penetrating enough to reach their ears, Go hide behind that boulder to the side in front of you. Just stand there and do not move another inch. When Yan Shiro heard that, she screamed back in disbelief. Do you think we're stupid? Are we really supposed to stand there to await our deaths? If you do not wish to die, then do as I say. Qin Yu said indifferently. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. In comparison, Yan Shiwu was smarter than her sister. When she heard Qin Yu's words, she instinctively obeyed and hid herself behind the boulder, standing still and not daring to move a single muscle. Seeing that, Yan Shiro had no choice but to follow suit. Immediately, the vast and expansive flats fell silent. The demonic centipede that was speeding forward suddenly halted, the stamen-like mouth quivering slightly at the tip. It seemed to be rather puzzled why its two prey had suddenly disappeared, and its body that was tens of meters long writhed and twisted around in fury, becoming rather confused. It suddenly stopped its furious thrashing and turned its body towards a particular direction. There seemed to be some movement coming from there. At that moment, Qin Yu's was approaching step by step with almost no sound coming out from under her feet. But as her footsteps were too light, it made the creature start to doubt for a moment whether it was mistaken. Chapter 97. 3. Demonic Centipede. Suddenly, those footsteps grew louder. In fact, it broke into a run. The demonic centipede perked up immediately, and its body that had been stretched out flat on the ground suddenly came upright, lashing out a ferocious attack towards the source of the sound, but then crashed into an incredibly hard boulder instead. It became dizzy immediately, and it was a while before it regained its senses. Where's the enemy? The movements had clearly been coming from this direction. Why had it suddenly disappeared? The speed of the demonic centipede's attack was too fast to dodge, and Qin Yu had already leapt up to stand on one foot atop a high boulder, her arms held wide open, standing steadily. That creature had foolishly crashed into the boulder as expected, and though Qin Yu was at right above its head at that moment, the creature was completely unaware of it. Since it did not have any eyes or a nose, it could only stick its body close to the ground to feel the enemy's movement to locate them. It waited for a moment to ascertain that there was no other movements before it clumsily slithered away. However, it was right in that instant that Qin Yu's body suddenly shifted, and the foot she held suspended in the air was lowered as she jumped hard upon the boulder once. This time, the demonic centipede was smarter, and it did not go charging headlong towards the sound anymore, but decided to spit out a large mouthful of poison instead. Qin Yu immediately leapt onto another boulder, and the surface of the poison-covered boulder immediately started to bubble, actually softening as it melted down into a corrosive puddle. Qin Yu was aghast. That's some damaging attack. It seemed to realize that it was being toyed by the opponent, and it became furiously enraged. That stamen-shaped like mouth began to spray venomous fluid all over the place, looking like it would not rest if it did not force its prey to show itself today. Damn it! If it continues to remain in such a berserk state, things might turn out ugly. A spirit beast's power was at its strongest when it went berserk, and it could possibly advance its level. The aura around Qin Yu's body suddenly congealed, and she leapt up into the air. Her long upslanted eyes flashed with a dark glint, and they turned completely jet black, where not a single speck of white could be seen in those eyes, looking incredibly strange. Sacred burial arts, ravaging rot. With those few soft words that came out from her mouth, the ground suddenly lurched, and the entire place seemed to be rocking violently. Countless thick and strong black vines then burrowed out from underground, every inch covered with sharp hooked barbs, the tips of the vines waving like wildly tentacles of an octopus. They were clearly so soft and flexible, but they continued to grow incessantly, every single vine like a sharp blade that left countless wounds on the body of the demonic centipede. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. What was most precious to the demonic centipede was the blood that ran inside its body, which was more greatly prized than the venom that it spat out through its mouth. If that venom was cultivated into poison, it would definitely qualify to be placed among the top 10 on the poison charts, but when it bled, with the loss of blood, its attack also becomes weaker. The thick vines continued to grow maniacally, increasing endlessly in number, till it finally formed into a circular prison that fully surrounded the demonic centipede, trapping it as they coiled around its body and gradually tightened, which sped up the rate of its bleeding. Trapped inside, the demonic centipede let out highly agonized cries, its stamen-shaped mouth spitting out venomous fluid in an attempt to corrode the vines off it. But any vine that was corroded away was quickly replaced by the never-ending growth of more vines, which did not help its predicament at all, but merely weaken itself further. It might be because of its perilous situation that it came to ignite its survival instincts further. It continued to struggle and writhe, and the venom from its mouth was suddenly like a dam that had been opened, spurting out like a torrent which pushed the vines back over a large area. Its body then suddenly expanded in size by a full round in an instant, and that small stamen-like mouth suddenly turned into gaping jaws that was filled with teeth sharp as saws. The eyes of the golden-haired youth from further away turned sharp. Good grief! It has risen a level. Chapter 98. 1. Curtains close for the 8th level spirit beast. The birth of a level 8 spirit beast caused the entire Hades Canyon to quake, the raging roar of wild torrential energy surging out in waves that caused other spirit beasts in the surrounding area to shiver as they cowered in their corners, not daring to come out. It was pushing all the other spirit beasts into hopelessness. The recent birth of a heaven-defying super-divine beast had already frightened them almost to death, and they had not dared to come out to roam in search for food even when their stomachs growled in hunger, thinking being able to survive another day was one day earned, deeply afraid that they'll encounter the lordly beast. And now, another high-leveled spirit beast had appeared. Looks like they should be making plans to leave this place of calamity, or they might find themselves dead without even knowing how they had lost their lives. And on the other end of the Hades Canyon, the two people, Lu Junyao and Bai Zhiyan, who heard the commotion, paused in their steps. That was the aura of an 8th level spirit beast. Lu Junyao said as he gazed far into the distance. And it is a variation of a mutant spirit beast, its ability surpassing that of regular 8th level spirit beasts. Bai Zhiyan shook his head and said, logically, such an unconventional place should not appear in these low-level lands, and the levels of the spirit beasts in here are relatively high, almost reaching the levels of the ones in the middle-level lands. Lu Junyao lowered his eyes in thought and then said slowly, the existence of this place by itself is already illogical, and now the Hades Canyon has sunk deep underground, so it will not show up in the world anymore. Upon saying that, he then glanced darkly at Bai Zhiyan. The most urgent task at hand now is to find that little pet of yours first. If it doesn't know what's good for itself and comes to hurt that lass, I will not care what your intentions are with the beast, I will make sure it loses a few layers of its skin. A corner of Bai Zhiyan's mouth twitched. Do you have to be so vicious? Moreover, I feel that the lass isn't someone that is so easily disadvantaged, you know. Qin Yu was pushed back to one side by the great blast of energy from the creature's level advancement and saw that the fella's body had grown explosively by a few sizes, its mouth that had originally looked rather clumsy now become incredibly malevolent. No matter how aggressive the black vines were at that moment, they were no longer able to hold down the creature who had advanced into its next level, and they all began to retreat, burrowing back underground. Mistress. Zhang Mai was a little worried when he saw that, and he had moved to come beside the young lady to say earnestly, use me. Ever since we came to this strange world, we have never once stood together in battle before. Qin Yu cast him a brief glance. Go back and help me keep watch over little Bei. Don't come mess things up. But you'll get hurt. So what? Qin Yu's demeanor was indifferent. Only when one constantly gets hurts and bleeds, will one's strength come to be elevated even higher. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The young lady's beautiful and alluring eyes then turned red and gold, and the aura over her body suddenly underwent a change in that instant, a change that caused Zhang Mai to tremble despite himself, the expression on his face becoming rather excited. Just a mere 8th level spirit beast is not even worth my attention at all. Today is its first day becoming a high-level spirit beast, and it will also be its last. The figure that was clearly so thin and frail was suddenly exuding an aura that felt like one from a king who gazes upon the world with contempt. Zhang Mai's gaze grew profound and deep. This was his mistress' true self, haughty and noble, the only master that was able to inherit the sacred burial arts. Even though she was starting all over again from scratch and her powers were not as strong as before, she still possessed that same powerful and tenacious soul deep down inside. Although the transformed demonic centipede still did not have any eyes or ears, its senses were now more than 100 times stronger, seeming like it did not need to depend on movements for it to determine the direction its prey was in. The boulder that hid Yen Shiro and Yen Shiwu was then summarily corroded cleanly away by a mouthful of venom from the demonic centipede's mouth, and if they had not gotten away in time, their bodies would have completely rotted away together. Chapter 98. 2. Curtains close for the 8th level spirit beast. In order to not let those two troublesome girls come to be a hindrance to Qingyu, Zhang Mai stretched his hand out and pulled them over to his side before he picked up the still unconscious Qing Bei to retreat back by about 100 meters. When in his invisible state, no one was able to see him except for Qingyu, and hence when they saw Qing Bei's body lifting up into the air, the two girls who felt themselves being dragged together along then exchanged a glance with each other, both their eyes showing utter disbelief and shock. But when they saw that they were at a seemingly safe place, they were then not so afraid anymore. Seeing Qingyu, who was facing that enormous and terrifying monster all by herself, Yan Shiro's face then creased up to ask with a bitter laugh, "Will she die?" The golden-haired youth who was watching the battle inadvertently heard that question, and he turned a sinister gaze upon them before he sent a knuckle sandwich flying. The pain caused Yan Shiro to let out a loud cry, and she then turned to look around her, her face looking like she had seen a ghost. "What's with you?" Yan Shiwu asked puzzledly upon seeing her clasp her hands over her head. "Nothing, nothing." Yan Shiro replied sheepishly. "Has she encountered a ghost?" She had said it so softly and she was heard. It couldn't have been Qingyu that rapped her on the head, right? The thick and powerful tail then swept towards her and Qingyu easily dodged, only to see that the spot she had just been standing in was now a deep hole. If she had not avoided the blow, she would have been smashed into meat paste from the one strike. Her eyes turned icy. Since this fellow was dead set on wanting her killed, then she would go into battle with everything she had. Within those wide poison-filled gaping jaws, its teeth sharp as saws ground against each other, like they wanted to shred her up so badly. As it came closer, the strange odor emanating in waves out from those jaws caused the complexion on Qingyu's face to turn an ugly shade, and her eyes to flash with a vicious glint. The slender figure leapt up into the air, and landed straight upon the demonic centipede's head. A beam of light flashed in her hand, and in the very next instant, an agonized and rage-filled roar shot towards the clouds, that seemed to shake the ground and made the mountains quiver. Immediately thereafter, the creature's large head with its jaws filled with its saw-like teeth was seen to have a good half of it sliced right off, and blood was spurting out everywhere unendingly. In an instant, the chaos that erupted became even worse than that of the storm that struck when the creature advanced in level and transformed, as if the sky was falling and the earth was splitting apart. It caused all the other spirit beasts to shiver and shake, their hearts filling up with despair, thinking that they would most probably have to leave their lives behind here today. Although Qingyu had moved very quickly to get away from the demonic centipede side, but in a moment of carelessness, she had been struck by a flying rock swept up by the enormous tail's thrashing. Excruciating pain washed over her and she subconsciously bit down hard on her lip. She seemed to have dislocated her arm. The golden-haired youth's eyes grew dark when he saw that, the beautiful silver gold orbs becoming tainted by a black mist, looking unspeakably strange and evil. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. A weapon spirit is linked in mind with his contracted owner, and although Qingyu consciousness was distracted by the agonizing pain, she had still noticed the change that was coming over Zhang Mai, and her brows knitted tightly together. Little burrow. She did not know what the lad had done that he had kept hidden from her before. That devilish spirit of a human he had used to restore his spirit body must have belonged to someone extraordinary. Otherwise, how could it have such a great effect on little burrow? "I'm fine. Calm yourself down. Do not lose your mind." The youth blinked his eyes. That expression on his face was clearly so innocent and adorable looking, but insidious murder was hidden behind it somehow. But, it has hurt mistress, the young lady's exquisite and beautiful countenance was stained with a speck of bright red blood. She had gotten that scrape when she was flung out in that one moment of carelessness. At that moment, she lifted her slender fingers up and wiped the blood cleanly off. By the time she raised her eyes up, her gaze was already tinged with bloodthirsty murder. Chapter 98. 3. Curtains close for the 8th level spirit beast. The cherry-pink lips curled up in a mesmerizing arc, so beautiful it moved one's very soul. "Little burrow, how long do you think? I will need to take this fella down. The youth's eyes flashed slightly as he looked at the rage-filled demonic centipede who was stirring up a violent sandstorm with its massive body before he said, with it being in a berserk state, its powers is comparable to that of a 9th-level spirit beast. If this was to be dealt with by my mistress of the past, you would have killed it in an instant. But with your current self. About an incense stick's time. Qin Yu listened to the youth's carefully worded statement, like he was afraid that her pride would be hurt, but had still chosen not to deceive her. She gave a light laugh and then slowly walked towards the roaring and wildly thrashing spirit beast in the middle, and under the violent wind, she muttered just a few words tonelessly. Just 10 breaths is more than enough. Zhang Mai's narrowed eyes then widened when he saw the sudden change in the slender young lady's aura, and he subconsciously clenched his fists tightly. He knew very well, that once Qin Yu made a decision, no one would ever be able to change it, and she had never liked anyone to interfere with her affairs. So no matter how worried Zhang Mai was feeling right at that moment, there was nothing he could do but to push down the strong impulse that was rising up inside. Just wait for a while more. And if anything unexpected really happens, even if he would be severely berated, he would not just stand idly by. But when he raised up his eyes to look, he came to discover that he had really been worried for nothing. The phoenix-like eyes that had glinted with that bright voracious thirst for blood narrowed, her palms wrapped in blinding and searing golden-red flames curled in a claw, she thrust her hand straight into the sliced open head of the demonic centipede, which brought about a great spray of bright red blood to splatter all over, though not a single drop came to stain her pristine white clothes. The sound of flesh and bone being torn apart was absolutely bone-chilling. The demonic centipede was completely defenseless, the searing heat that felt like lava from hell burning it from the wound in its head all the way to the tip of its tail. The young lady's long slender fingers that had looked so weak and frail then closed tightly upon its spirit core crystal, trying to tear it right out from its body. Never had a spirit beast ever been so horrifyingly violated. Its body still alive, and made to feel long agonizing pain of having its spirit core being ripped out. A spirit beast's core lay in its spirit core crystal. Without its spirit core, even if it did not die, it would turn to become just a soft and limp bug without any attack capabilities, and its lifespan greatly reduced, agony that was completely unimaginable. The demonic centipede was feeling greatly aggrieved. It did not understand why such a weak human could have suddenly turned to become so horrifying in an instant. The strange blazing heat continued to burn it from its insides, making it feel like its body was about to explode. Aggrievement filled the demonic centipede. It did not want to submit just like that. It wanted to struggle. It wanted to run away. But in the next second, starting from the tip of its tail, the flesh and blood started to disappear, spreading upwards inch by inch as it turned to bare white bones. What was even more terrifying was that it could clearly feel its death slowly approaching. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, no. No. Impossible. It is an 8th-level spirit beast. An 8th-level spirit beast. The highest level spirit beast in this lands. Is this end now before its path towards a new peak has even started? That's just unacceptable. The woeful roar of the trapped beast rang out as the last bit of darkness dissipated from the sky. When the sky brightened, turning fully into day, the demonic centipede stood erect in its spot, with only its skeletal remains left behind. In the young lady's hands, a bright red core crystal as big as a baby's fist flashed with an enchanting luster. The corners of her lips lifting up, she then said, "Ha, got it." Chapter 99. 1. Alive. Dead. An 8th-level spirit beast's core crystal was indeed extraordinary. Just holding it in one's hand and one is able to feel the pulse of the spirit power within. Qin Yu kept the core crystal away and saw the handsome featured countenance of the youth who had been watching her from not too far away seem to relax in relief. Curling up the ends of her lips, she walked over to him. "How? I did not disappoint you, did I?" Of course mistress is as powerful as she always has been. Zhang Mai said with his eyes turning into two smiling arcs. I had thought that mistress would need to expend quite a bit of effort against that 8th level spirit beast. Qin Yu shrugged her shoulders in helplessness. Who asked her to have so many divine artifacts cheats on her? Where are those two? She then came to realize that Yan Shiro and Yan Shiwu were not there and she asked quizzically. Oh, over there. The youth pointed casually with a finger. Qin Yu followed the direction of the finger and saw the two young ladies lying side by side beside a boulder, their eyes tightly closed. I was afraid that they were too timid and it would scare them to death to see you become so brutal, so I simply knocked them out. Zhang Mai explained lazily. Good job. Qin Yu nodded. In fact, it really wasn't suitable for them to witness such a scene as there would be too many things that would be hard to explain. She crouched down and reached her hand out, feel little Bei's pulse at his neck. She then opened his clothes at the shoulder to check the wound. Fortunately she had acted quickly to control the poison and the wound had not spread to become too large, but the corroded wound still looked rather grisly. To see that the youth's smooth skin had such an ugly wound, it was really quite an eyesore. Qin Yu knitted up her brows. Although it would be rather painful. Her long slender fair-skinned fingers summoned up fiery flame, and she brushed it lightly over the wound on the shoulder. Ugh! The intense searing pain jolted Qin Bei out of unconsciousness. Elixir fire has cleansing and detoxifying effects, and although the process was rather tormenting, but it was the best method to use at that moment. The youth's eyes that had been rather dazed turned clear in an instant, his body unable to move at all. His senses had become exceptionally sensitive and pronounced, and the only thing he was feeling at that moment was only that extremely excruciating pain. Besides gritting his teeth tightly together to endure it, there was nothing else he could do. He knew that Qin Yu was helping him dispel the poison. Shortly after, the burning agony was finally gone. Qin Yu looked at the wound that was already beginning to congeal and scab and she breathed out a soft sigh in relief. She then took out a bottle of skin rejuvenating salve and applied it over the wound. With that, it should heal up in less than 2 days. Qin Bei's body was also slowly starting to be able to feel, and he was able to move. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. He sat up from the ground and said in a grim voice. Sis, I can't help having a feeling that this place is not just ordinarily dangerous. Logically, people who have come to Hades Canyon for rigorous training in the past had not come to encounter such a powerful and unusual spirit beast, and the entire place was just oozing with strange peculiarity, with dangers way above the middle average level, already perilous enough to be placed among the continent's 3 most deadly places. Hearing him say that, Qin Yu nodded her head in agreement and said, I had felt that something isn't right about this place as well. Compared to what people who have come here before have said, the kind of spirit beasts and the environment we have seen so far is a completely different place entirely. I feel that we should leave this place as soon as possible. Qin Bei said with a serious expression. We have retrieved quite a number of spirit beast core crystals throughout the trip, and although we have not reached the 10 days dateline, leaving this place prematurely is purely for the sake of our safety before we encounter a situation that will not be able to defend ourselves against. Moreover, we have 2 deadweights with us. Chapter 99. 2, alive. Dead? Qin Bei said without any expression on his face as he cast his glance to look at the 2 people knocked unconscious just a short distance away from them. It seemed as if these 2 people had mostly been in an unconscious state throughout the mission. Tagging along with Qin Yu for the training had been too blissful for them, that had them being so well protected. If it was up to him to say, he would have dumped them behind so they would not be such a hindrance. Qin Yu smiled helplessly without a word and then said, calculating the amount of time, about 6 or 7 days should have passed. Let's just wait till the Mao hour today and then leave. After Yan Shiro and Yan Shiwu were awakened, the few of them then left the highly dangerous place at great speed, leaving the massive and highly striking set of spirit beast skeletal remains behind them. Not long after they left, the ground suddenly began to shake violently and the flat plains that had been filled with dense cracks then began to rise. With a particularly intense shiver, all the rocks and boulders in all kinds of various shapes and sizes then slid downwards, like they had all fallen down into a deep canyon, without kicking up even a cloud of dust. A moment after, that cracked and parched soil then continued to slide off, to slowly reveal a kind of smooth hide. That seemingly boundless plains, was actually the back of a gargantuan beast. It was a beast that was bigger and wider than the enormous demonic centipede by several hundred times. It was as if it had laid dormant deep underground, suddenly awakened from its long deep sleep, and the many living things that had come to grow upon its back was now all falling and detaching off its body. It had a toweringly tall and massive body, for elegantly long and strong limbs, the head of a dragon and body of a tiger, a strange and unusual form. Right in the middle of its forehead, was a thick and sharp horn, seemingly highly powerful, its pair of bright and expressive eyes shining with intelligence. Warm gusts of air snorted out from its nose and the corners of its mouth actually split into a highly human-like smile, that would send chills running through people. It looked at the skeletal remains of the demonic centipede and though there was no more life in them, it could still sense the lingering terror and regret. The gargantuan beast then seemed to snort rather mockingly with a rumble in its throat before it raised a paw to smash the demonic centipede's remains into dust, that was then dispersed into the wind. Its eyes gazed forward, the meaning in them unclear. The way forward had been a whole lot safer for the group and they did not come across any more strange encounters. They had been rather lucky to have captured 2 very low-leveled heaven-scuttling bunnies along the way as well. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The reason for that name was because they were a species of rabbits that could fly and burrow, most highly skilled escapists. But unfortunately they had been met with Qin Yu who used her golden needles to pin them to the ground to immobilize them, where they then just looked up pitifully at her. Qin Yu completely ignored those eyes. At such a low level, they didn't even possess core crystals. If not to be caught and roasted for food, what other great accomplishments were they hoping to achieve? Besides being just a bit bigger in size than regular rabbits, the heaven-scuttling bunnies were rather normal. But when she saw Qin Yu skillfully gut and skin the rabbits to roast them over the fire, Yan Shiro just could not take her eyes off her. It must be known that after the last time she ate the meat of the great spiked hog, she had completely lost her appetite for a few good days, and she was really looking forward to having some meat today. But seeing Qin Yu prepare the rabbits in front of her after Qin Bei set up a simple roasting rack, Yan Shiro could not help but feel a little puzzled. Why do the two of you seem so well practiced in things like this? Both of you have not come out for wilderness training before. In her impression, Qin Bei was a weak and frail cripple who dragged his handicapped body that had nothing but an intelligent mind around, and Qin Yu was a weak and timid know-nothing, a decorative vase that did not dare to retaliate even when bullied. Chapter 99. 3, Alive? Dead? But the changes that had come over these two people, were as if they were two completely different people. If she was not looking at them straight in their faces, she might have thought that they were both impostors. Qin Yu glanced at her looking rather amused. If you don't do it the first time, you will then never be able to do it. You have to depend on yourself when you come out here and not anyone else. Look over there. Yan Shiro followed the direction of her gaze and she saw that Yan Shiwu had already walked a distance away and was bent over to gather some twigs and branches. Her face immediately grew a little ashamed. All of the others were doing something but here she was just waiting for food. It did not seem very nice and she did not even dare to raise up her eyes to look at Qin Yu but just went ahead to help Yan Shiwu gather firewood. Compared to the unwilling reluctance the first time, she took the initiative on her own this time. Qin Yu lowered her eyes and smiled to herself as she continued to prepare the rabbits she held in her hands. After she stuffed the spices inside the rabbits, she then poked sharp branches through them and placed them over the fire to roast after the rabbits were ready. All that was left to do was to wait for them to cook. On the other side, Yan Shiwu was carrying a pile of tree branches and was about to come back when something suddenly caught her foot which caused her to trip, almost making her fall. She quickly steadied herself and looked down. But as the sky was just too dark she could not see clearly, so she crouched down and felt about with her hand. It was something warm and soft to the touch, and when she felt what seemed to be several long and slender fingers, her entire person froze. Yan Shiwu had always been steady and restrained from young, and she was not as timid as most other girls. Hence, when she realized what she was touching was a hand, she did not scream out in fright. Coincidentally at that moment, the clouds in the sky were blown further away from that area, and Yan Shiwu came to see the deathly pale face of a man under the moonlight. Her heart was greatly shook and she fell back a few steps before she said with a slightly trembling voice, All of you come over here quick." Yan Shiro was not too far away from her, and when she came over, she went straight into a ear-piercing scream. Eek! A dead body! A dead body! Was it really that unusual to see a dead body in a place like this? Should it be something for anyone to freak out at? Qin Yu and Qin Bei went walking over when they heard the scream. Because she possessed good night vision, she saw it clearer than any of the others. A better half of the man's body was buried in the ground and only his head and 2 hands were exposed outside. His face was terrifyingly white, but his countenance was elegant and suave, refined and handsome looking. Although he was buried in the ground, but why did the posture seem so unbelievably strange? He was lying comfortably flat on his back, his arms seemingly widely spread out leisurely. His face did not seem to show any fear or pain, and if not for that ghastly-looking pallor of his face, anyone would have thought that he was just moonbathing there. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. A twitch tugged at the end of Qin Yu's brow. This was probably the only human they had encountered ever since they came here into Hades Canyon. It just seemed so very strange. Why had this man suddenly appeared here? She crouched down and stretched her hand out to check under the man's nose. When she reached her hand out and came to touch the man, her long upslanted phoenix-like eyes flared wide. He's still breathing. And flesh still warm. Just as she was crouched there with her face in shock, the deathly pale man suddenly wiggled his nose slightly, and after Yan Shiro let out a terrified scream, he opened his eyes. That smells good. The good-looking pair of ink jade-like black eyes turned, and his body then rose up, leaping right out of the ground, to sprint straight in one direction. Chapter 100. 1. Devilry must be afoot. When things seemed strange, the 2 succulent rabbits roasting above the fire were at that moment giving off a delicious and tempting aroma, the meat just getting cooked, the oil just beginning to drip from it to splash onto the ground. The man moved like the wind as he stretched a devilish claw straight towards the rabbits, the hand was denied its path when it was struck by a thin tree branch that flew through the air. He could not help but yelp out in pain and turn around to stare with baleful eyes. Qin Yu was holding another sizable tree branch in her hand as she came walking slowly over, tapping the end of the branch on her other hand. She then asked with an indiscernible smile, "You still have the cheek to glare at me? Those rabbits were caught by me, skinned by me, and have you even asked me before you reached your claws towards them?" "That's right. Taking without asking is akin to stealing. To think that one who looked like a refined human would turn out to be so shameless and without scruple." Yan Shiro chimed in from one side in indignation. She had been eyeing those rabbits for so long. How could she possibly allow a complete stranger who just popped out of nowhere suddenly to steal the prize? Yan Shiro had just finished saying those words when the man's inky black eyes turned to look at her. There was less white in his eyes, his irises larger than normal, and it was a little terrifying to see up close. Although his facial features were quite good-looking, she still unconsciously shifted herself closer towards Qin Yu. The few of them in the group stared warily at the man, fearful that he might suddenly attack them. But after Qin Yu said those words, the man did not make any more moves towards the rabbits, and just sat there quietly to watch the glistening oil sizzle on the smooth and succulent-looking rabbit meat, his Adam's apple moving as he gulped longingly. His actions and demeanor just felt so indescribably strange, but as to what was wrong exactly, it was hard to put one's finger on it. Yen Shiro rubbed her arm and whispered softly, "What is it with this guy? Is he going to stay here and not leave? Or does he intend to share our food?" Towards the unwelcome guest who had popped right out of nowhere, seeing that he was not doing anything else but just watching without a sound, Qin Yu raised an eyebrow and went on to ignore him. She then took out her dagger and slid it over the rabbit meat a few times to make it easier for the meat to cook, while the man just watched her intently. It was a very strange scene to see. Qin Bei was a little worried as he leaned in closer to the young lady and said in a low voice, "Sis, this man just came out of nowhere out of the blue, half his body was buried in soil like a dead person. That is already strange enough, and he is now just staring fixedly at the succulent rabbits roasting on the rack like a lunatic without doing anything else. It's really rather worrying, you know." Qin Yu cut off a rabbit leg and handed it over to him as she said in an indifferent voice, "Don't bother about him. When it's the Mao hour, we'll just leave." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qin Bei knitted up his brows as he took the rabbit's leg and took a bite. The rabbit meat roasted with the specially mixed spices was tender and delicious, highly appetizing. But as his heart was still dangling in worry, he did not really pay much attention to how the meat tasted. On the other hand, Yen Shiro was watching eagerly, and it was until Qin Yu handed her a thigh that she then smiled contentedly. Even Yen Shiwu was seen to take a rare bite of the meat. It was not known how Qin Yu had prepared the rabbits, as even the fatty parts were not oily at all, but was tender and fragrant. The gaze of the man who was acting strangely then seemed to deepen bit by bit, like a terrifying storm was starting to brew up within, until a large meaty rabbit thigh was suddenly delivered right in front of his eyes, so close he could almost taste that alluring fragrance. The man instinctively froze for a moment and he then lifted his eyes to look at her. "Eat it. I can see that you must be hungry, but you must not just snatch people's things like that in future. If you happen to meet more unfriendly people, they would have given you a good thrashing," Qin Yu said in an easy tone, with an eyebrow arched up. Chapter 100. 2. Devilry must be afoot when things seem strange. That action had not only caused the man to be stunned, but all the others did not understand it as well. It was a good while before that man was able to react, his hands grabbing the rabbit leg to take big ravenous bites out of it, looking extremely hungry. The whirlwind speed he carried out his actions at shocked the few other people into a daze, and as the rabbit was big in size, its thigh was sizable as well. They had not even finished half of what they had when the man had already cleanly finished his share in an instant, even crunching up the bones with his teeth and gobbling it all down. Just how long has he not eaten meat? Qin Yu thought about it for a while and then gave one half of a rabbit they still had remaining to the man. The other rabbit would be enough of the other 3 people to eat. As expected, the man wolfed down the large piece of rabbit meat in a few mouthfuls, finishing it lightning quick, which amazed the others so much they actually forgot to eat, but just stared at the man with wooden expressions on their faces. Seeing that he had finished eating, Qin Yu finally asked, "Who are you? Why were you buried under the soil?" It was probably because she gave him food to eat, and the man's gaze was no longer that malevolent. It was a while before his raspy voice spat out 2 syllables slowly. "Sleeping." Qin Yu was slightly taken aback by that reply, but she quickly recovered. "You mean to say that you were sleeping and was not buried under the soil?" The man nodded. "Then why were you sleeping under all that soil?" Qin Yu felt a little speechless. That was quite an eccentric habit. The man's gaze looked at her a little disdainfully, like she was asking him a highly irrational question, but he still replied with one word. "Comfort." There are really so many strange people who do strange things nowadays. This one here likes to imitate dead people by sleeping covered over with dirt. How did you come to appear in here? Qin Yu then asked the question that had been on her mind. Logically, the spot he had been sleeping in was the direction they had walked past coming here, so why did no one notice the man's presence before? The man was seemingly becoming a little impatient, but he still knew the rule that eating people's food should at least loosen his lips, so he stacked on quite a few words this time. I found myself here upon waking up. Where are you from? I don't remember. There is a saying, one is deemed too talkative when the topic does not agree, and it was very true in this case. Qin Yu had not been snubbed so thoroughly ever before, and no matter how gifted a tongue she had, she just could not seem to find a common topic with this man. Anyway, he was just a passing acquaintance and they might not ever meet again after they leave this place today, so it did not really matter that much. After their bellies were filled and comforted, the group of people sat by the fire to get some rest, taking turns to keep watch. And because of the arrival of their unwelcome guest, all of them were extra wary. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The strange man did not come any closer but just kept a good distance away to watch them. It was probably because he had had abundant sleep that his eyes were wide open as he surveyed the surroundings curiously, like an ignorant child studying everything in their world. After a while, it might be because he was getting tired where his eyes slowly began to shut, to fall soundly asleep. When the Mao hour comes, they would then be leaving this place. But, what they had not thought, was that the entrance into Hades Canyon, had at that moment completely disappeared, and the environment inside had undergone tumultuous changes, falling completely into night, where the light of day would no longer be seen, the already pitiful 4 hours of light no longer coming, with the entire place buried deep underground henceforth. The sands of time trickled bit by bit, and Qin Yu sat there in meditation. Although her eyes were closed, her heart saw everything clearly. Chapter 100. 3. Devilry must be afoot when things seemed strange. By the time she opened her eyes and blew out a breath of impure air, her brows immediately creased together as she stared into the inky dark night sky. Why isn't the sky changing in color at all? Based on her calculations, it should at least be 3/4 past the hour close to dawn, and not only was the sky seemingly not showing any signs of brightening but it seemed to be further steeped in darkness. There was a faint nagging ominous feeling in her heart and she quickly went to wake the others. What happened? Yen Shiro asked lazily as she raised a hand to rub her sleep-filled eyes. Qin Bei became alert very quickly and Yen Shiwu was looking well rested as they looked quizzically at her. We might not be able to get out. Qin Yu said slowly. What kind of a joke are you making? Once the Mao hour is here, we'll be able to leave, won't we? Yen Shiro retorted with a yawn, disregarding what Qin Yu said completely. It is already 3/4 past the hour and it will be the Mao hour very soon. But look at the sky. Qin Yu said as she pointed up at the sky, before indicating for them to look at their surroundings. There weren't so many tall trees here before. Do you remember? These gigantic trees were growing near where the Hades Canyon's entrance was. That seems to be the case. Yen Shiwu said, looking rather startled. Anne. Qin Bei's eyes swept to a spot at the side. When did that man disappear? The man had still been here when he had closed his eyes, but he was nowhere in sight at that moment. Truly an example of, devilry must be afoot when things seem strange. Qin Yu's eyes narrowed, and she suddenly recalled something. Does everyone still have that teleportation jade token Elder Qin gave us? Hearing that, everyone took out their jade tokens and held them together. There is only one way to prove if we have all been trapped in here and are not able to get out. The jade tokens that Qin Fang gave them could not be fake and they would only need to crush the jade tokens to get themselves transported right out of this place. Exchanging glances with each other, they all crushed their jade tokens at almost the same moment. A faint white light flew out from inside but disappeared in the next instant. After the jade tokens were crushed, they lost their effectiveness and disappeared completely. How can this be? Yen Shiro's face was pale as she stared incredulously. Has the teleportation jade token lost its effectiveness? Why did it not work? Elder Qin will not lie to us. The jade tokens must still be effective. Yen Shiwu then said. Then why are we still here? Are we not going to be able to get out from here? Yen Shiro was frantic, and she then broke into tears. Are we going to die here? Boo hoo hoo. And I did not even get to see Mother for the last time. All right. Stop crying. What's the use of crying now? Qin Bei grew angry when he saw her looking so useless and went on to say viciously, Go on and cry, but if you come to draw anything to us with your bawling, you can go deal with it yourself. Yen Shiro immediately stopped, not daring to cry anymore, struggling to hold back her tears. The Hades Canyon might have disappeared. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. After quite a long while, Qin Yu stood up and stared into the pitch-black night as she said slowly, Even our surroundings have changed, and the sky still has not turned bright till now. This place might have fallen deep underground. Otherwise why would so many strange gigantic trees appear right out of thin air? They were not given the luxury of time to go consider the situation any further when a heavy and low rumbling booming slowly sounded in the distance. It sounded like some enormous beast, and the booming was the sound of its footsteps due to its overly large body walking. The moonlight grew hazy and a terrifying bolt of lightning suddenly struck the ground, which caused a crack that was a good 10 meters deep to appear. Chapter 101. 1. Sheer cliff, but that was not the end of it. The crack continued to extend down deep into the ground and split into two, to form a wide divisive chasm. The chasm gradually widened, and as the spot she had been standing was a distance away from the others, by the time Qin Yu was able to react, she was already separated from the other three people, them standing on one end, and she standing on the other side. Sis! Qin Bei shouted anxiously, seemingly wanting to cross over to the other side. But the gulf was continuing to widen and the ground was still shaking violently. Rock and stone came dislodged and fell down into the deep chasm, and there was no sound of them hitting the bottom. In his panicked state, it was all he could do to steady his feet. All of you must protect yourselves well. I am fine. Qin Yu raised her voice to say. The tips of her ears then perked up, coming to hear the dull booming thump coming closer. Her long up-slanted eyes narrowed as she tried to ascertain the source of the sound. Finally, the thick and sharp horn was the first to be revealed before her eyes, and four slender limbs next, its eyes big as bronze bells which emitted a blinding white light, its dragon-like head majestic and grand. Its body was unbelievably massive, almost blocking out the entire sky. The oppressive aura it exuded was so powerful it could cause one's chest to turn hot, and vomit out a whole mouthful of blood. Qin Yu forcibly resisted against the oppression, pushing down the rank metallic taste at the back of her throat. What kind of a monster could this be that it possesses such immense power? The oppression in its aura is 100 times stronger than when the demonic centipede had gone berserk. The gargantuan-sized beast came closer with each step, its head seemingly hidden above the clouds, and it could well be imagined just how enormous the beast truly was. It then snorted derisively through its nose and said, "Humans, you've disturbed my peace." The group of people were startled. It spoke. That means it's a spirit beast that surpassed the 8th level. Not only have they been trapped in here with no way out, they have now come to encounter such a powerful spirit beast. We're finished. We're surely done for this time. Yen Shiro's face was horribly pale as she unconsciously gripped Yen Shiwu's arm tightly, her fingers trembling in fear. Yen Shiwu's gaze was instead tightly fixed upon Qin Yu, who was now a far distance away from them, her heart filled with a sense of blind irrational trust that Qin Yu would be able to deal with things, and that they would not die here just like that. We were already all prepared to leave, but we are unable to get out. We have no intentions of intruding and causing any affront. Qin Yu had just come out from a battle and her body had not fully recovered. Under such circumstances, she did not really want a heated clash. For the spirit beast to be capable of human speech, it must possess outstanding intelligence. If she's able to settle this peacefully, that would be best. Hearing that, the gigantic beast lowered its head to look at her, the ends of its lips raised up in a gleeful smile. Of course you'll not be able to get out. No one in here will be able to get out. Because this entire place has already disappeared. Disappeared? Qin Yu was taken aback. What do you mean? The gigantic beast seemed to be in a rather good mood as it went on to explain to her, this place is basically an illusory realm that was born when I went into a deep sleep while I was advancing to the next level, and now that I have awoken, the place would naturally then cease to exist. Illusory realm. Qin Yu would never have thought that the Hades Canyon that had been around in these land for several tens of years would turn out to be an illusory realm that did not exist in reality. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, but if the illusion has disappeared, then where were they physically now? No, that cannot be right. Qin Yu's eyes then darkened. You want to trap us all in here? The gigantic beast looked at her, a little surprised, and then shook its head. A brightness shone in those intelligent eyes tinged with slight anticipation. I will kill off the other people in a while and only you will remain behind, to forever accompany me. Chapter 101. 2. Sheer Cliff, how dare you? Qin Yu's face was tinged with slight anger. Is there something wrong with this spirit beast's brain? It couldn't possibly have fallen for her, has it? There is nothing I don't dare to do. The gigantic beast burst out in laughter. Its gazes then darkened and the sharp lone horn on its head began to crackle with an electrifying light. Another violent bolt of lightning shot towards a spot on the other side where Qin Bei and the sisters were standing and a chunk of the ground suddenly collapsed. If not for Qin Bei's quick actions that pulled the two young girls away, they would have already fallen down into the bottomless chasm. The frightened faces of the two of them were devoid of all human color as they gripped on tightly to Qin Bei's clothes. On the other side, Qin Bei's heart was beating madly from shock and she said through tightly clenched teeth, despicable. To think that such a high-level spirit beast would use such cheap and lowly tricks against weak humans. Where the inspiring valor that should come from such a majestic spirit beast. However, the gigantic spirit beast did not feel the slightest tinge of shame from being berated. Weak humans will not live for long and will in turn end up as food for spirit beasts, so why not just die earlier? Rest assured. Down below is where my life's fire lie and I guarantee that they will turn into ash in an instant, and they will not even feel anything. This brutal spirit beast was really so viciously cruel. At the moment when it unleashed another attack upon the people over on the other side, Qin Yu completely ignored the violent shaking in the ground and tapped the points of her feet on the ground to leap over to the other side, and moved at an astounding speed to grab the few people, bringing them to a comparatively safer location back on this side. The gigantic beast did not know the reason why, but it liked Qin Yu very much and it wasn't ready to hurt her. When it saw that she had leapt over to the other side, it quickly tried to retract the lightning that was whizzing ferociously forward but was still a step too late. Although Qin Yu had dodged very quickly, but she was still struck on the arm by that lightning and her arm instantly turned numb, unable to feel anything. The left arm that had been dislocated earlier but she had not attended to it much was now wounded in addition to the original injury. A portion of the snowy white robe was charred black and bright red blood flowed down past her fingertips to drip onto the ground. Sis. Qin Yu. The eyes of the few of them who saw that happen right before them immediately grew red-rimmed, brimming over with emotions. No matter how much she disliked Qin Yu all this time, the always foul-mouthed Yan Shiro immediately broke into tears when she saw the wretched state of Qin Yu's arm, thinking it must be horrendously painful. If it wasn't because she wanted to save them, she wouldn't have been hurt. And at that moment, the power of the lightning blast that had already gotten 2/3 of the ground blown off suddenly caused the edge below Qin Yu to crumble into rubble. Qin Yu's body was stiff and numb, and in a moment of inattentiveness, her slender body went falling down together, her white robe billowing out with the rush of the wind as she fell, looking like a plummeting butterfly. Qin Bei's elegant eyes immediately flared wide, a surge of power seeming to gush up inside his body that was going to burn up his entire person. But the unnatural feeling in his body did not hold his attention, as all his focus was only pinpointed upon the young lady falling down into the deep chasm. Qin Yu. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. He wanted to go save her without caring about anything else, but it was as if his body was rooted to the ground, unable to move at all, despite him struggling with everything he had till green veins were bulging up prominently at his temples. No. Let me go. The gigantic beast had not expected that such a thing would happen, and it was stunned in shock, with panic coming to appear in its eyes. A shadow fleeted past its eyes, straight down towards the deep chasm. The gigantic beast stared with its eyes wide, not having been able to clearly see what that was. Thereafter, a mirth-filled voice then rang out darkly behind it. "Little one, you've gotten yourself in big trouble this time. You better pray hard this time." Chapter 101. 3. Sheer cliff. The gigantic beast immediately turned its head around with a snap and saw an enchantingly handsome-looking man in red robes. It was taken aback for a moment before it asked, "My lord, what made you come here today? With such a great commotion you caused advancing a level, shouldn't I at least come have a look?" Bai Yen said with a click of his tongue. "Hurry up and keep this form of yours away. It's an eyesore. Aren't you already able to change your form?" Hearing that, the gigantic beast's body then shrank, and in a puff of green smoke, a tall black-robed figure appeared before his eyes, his face refined and good-looking, like a smooth and suave playboy. His eyes were rather unique, where the whites of his eyes were almost non-existent, its dark irises taking up a huge portion of them, a little unusual looking. "You don't look like you're any good at all," Bai Yen said, snorting a couple of times in contempt. This man was the one who had previously appeared so suddenly, the man who had wanted to snatch away their rabbits. "So it's you." Yen Shiro glared at him with wide eyes, becoming so angry she forgot to be afraid and admonished him fiercely, "Aren't you being too ungrateful here? To think that Qin Yu was so kind to offer you food, seeing that you were so hungry, you have now caused her to fall off the edge of such a sheer cliff." The man knew that he was in the wrong here, and he just rubbed his nose without saying a word. Hearing those words, Bai Yen raised an eyebrow and asked, "Do you know who that young lady that fell off is?" The man's eyes lit up with joy when he heard her being mentioned, but then turned a little sad as he said, "Her roasted rabbit was delicious. I loved it. I wanted to keep her here to keep me company. It was not intentional." "Keep her as company?" Bai Yen looked as if he had just heard a joke, his plum blossom-like eyes shining dazzlingly, unable to hide his mirth. "You dare to even like her? You're really just the greatest. The greatest spirit beast I have ever seen in my life." "Ha ha ha." The man sought Bai Yen doubled over in laughter, and he just continued to just look at him in confusion. It was quite a while before Bai Yen was able to stop laughing, and he then raised his eyes up to look at the man. "I told you on the very day that I saved you that you will come to serve a person in future, and that person's position is above me, the Lord that I serve." The man nodded. "But does that have anything to do with this? The young lady that just fell off is my lord's benefactor who saved his life. Moreover, she is a high-grade elixir cultivator, the type whose single pill of level advancement elixir will allow you to become a super divine beast within a short period of time." Bai Yen looked at the man whose face was turning white bit by bit, his expression turning into one of horror. Bai Yen paused for a moment before he said, "Before we got here, he has already stated that if you turn out to be too blind to see and come to harm a single hair on her, he will have you skinned. The man's seemingly tall and brawny figure then suddenly shivered involuntarily. On the other end, because of her draining strength and the fact that she was wounded, Qin Yu was not able to breathe for an instant as she fell. Her weapon spirit in her body was frantically calling out to her, "Mistress! Wake up and let me out!" A weapon spirit would not be able to come out from the dimensional space when their master had lost consciousness. Seeing the frail state that Qin Yu was in, Zhang Mai was frantic with panic, but in the next instant, the link with the outside world was cut off. Qin Yu had fainted. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The people up on the cliff's surface were all sitting on pins with the probable exception of Bai Yan. It was till the sound of light footsteps sounded that everyone looked up, and saw a tall and muscular man in a purple robe carrying a slim figure in his arms, slowly walking towards them. When he came closer they were all astounded at the man's countenance, which was exquisitely flawless in its beauty, the mesmerizing and soul-binding violet eyes under his brows exceptionally striking, his moist thin lips under that high-pointed nose pressed lightly together like he was withholding his emotion, and the terrifyingly sinister aura emanating from his body driving chills through their bodies. Qin Bei was rather stunned as he looked at that man, and something flashed through his mind. This man. Chapter 102. 1. Slicing off flesh to treat the wound. He might not find the man's face to be familiar, but that pair of violet eyes that were one of a kind had left a deep impression on him. Back when he had gone to the gathered cloud loft, he had seen that pair of eyes fleetingly through the curtain veil, and the red-clothed man had addressed the violet-eyed man as his lord. The man that Qin Yu saved, was most probably this man here. He had not expected that the owner of that pair of eyes would have such outstanding looks and command such a powerful presence. It was clear that he was not any ordinary man with just one glance. However, the scene where the slim figure of the young lady looked so small while being carried in his arms could really cause one to look at them with a surprised face, where one would come to feel that having such a proud and noble man who must surely see the world with nothing but contempt do something like this would just sully his very status. And for Qin Bei, it was also the first time that he was seeing his elder sister in such a weakened state. Lu Junyao's brows were furrowed up and his face was more frightening than anything. Bai Yan came walking over in a hurry and asked softly, "How is she?" "Have a look at her left arm," Lu Junyao said in a deep voice. Bai Yan then turned his gaze onto the young lady's left arm that was dangling on the outward-facing side. When Lu Junyao was walking towards them just now, that arm had been swinging limply with the momentum, like it had been broken. He stretched his hand out to feel the arm at the joint and his gaze then turned around to glare viciously at the tall panicked-faced man behind him. "Are you even a man? Tui. Do you even consider yourself to be male? How are you even able to strike at a dainty little young lady like this? Her entire arm has been completely dislodged." "I did not." The man tried to explain, looking highly aggrieved. "Stop denying it. I'll deal with you later." Bai Yan threatened fiercely. He then held on to the young lady's slender arm and with one hand pulling while the other pushed, he popped the arm's joint back in place in an instant. Ugh! The young lady's face with her exquisite features creased up as she let out a soft grunt from the pain. Lu Junyao then put her down and sat himself down on the ground, positioning her to lie against his body. He then very gently rolled up her sleeve, to reveal a portion of that arm with skin smooth as jade. But at that moment, a large part of the skin was charred black and stained with sticky blood, looking a little grisly. The few other people on the side could by now tell that the two men who had suddenly appeared were friends and not foes, and they seemed to be on rather close terms with Qin Yu, so the few of them then came in closer. Qin Bei suddenly found that his body could move and he hurried over as well, his eyes looking worriedly at the young lady who had her eyes tightly shut, and he then saw that rather frightening wound on her arm. With the amount of power the lightning blaze unicorn's lightning strike possessed, Qin Yu's injury could be considered to be rather light. It could be seen from here that that fella really had not meant to intentionally harm her. The man whom the lightning blaze unicorn had transformed into was at that moment looking guiltily at the young lady. He then opened his mouth to say in a very soft voice, "My blood will help her to recover, but as for the wound, it must be sliced off. If it's delayed any longer, her whole arm would be crippled." Although the lightning blaze had only wounded the flesh, but its immense power had also inflicted internal injuries. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Upon hearing that the dead flesh needed to be cut off, Qing Bei's brows knitted together. Is there no other way? To slice off such a large piece of her flesh, how painful would that be for Qing Yu? Bai Zhiyan arched up an eyebrow and looked at him. He had probably guessed that this was Qing Yu's younger brother, and his attitude became a lot more polite than the way he had been when they first met. This is the most effective way, or the wound will just turn more severe. Hearing that, Qing Bei did not say another word more. Bai Zhiyan's long slender fingers pull out a palm-length knife with a blade thin as a cicada's wing out of thin air, and he then cleanly sliced off the black charred flesh over the young lady's arm with one swift stroke, that exposed a bloody layer of flesh below, the bright red blood immediately spilling out in a gush. Chapter 102. 2. Slicing off flesh to treat the wound. Bai Zhiyan then skillfully scattered top-grade blood-clotting medicine over the wound, which stopped the blood from continuing to gush out in an instant. The pain from cutting off the flesh and the application of the medicine could well be imagined. Even though Qing Yu was unconscious at that moment, the pain caused her eyes to flare wide open, her good hand gripping tightly on Lu Junyao's clothes, the luxurious cloth immediately becoming hopelessly creased. Upon seeing her eyes open, the expression on Lu Junyao's face finally smoothed out a little, and he asked in a soft voice, "It hurts very much?" The young lady's lips were pale from clenching her jaws tight, and upon hearing those words she subconsciously retorted, "You try it and see if it hurts." It was only after saying those words that she realized that something wasn't right. The man who was bandaging her wound right before her eyes. Bai Zhiyan. Then the one who just spoke. And she was lying down against him. Realizing the position her body was in, she immediately stiffened a moment and then tried to get up, but she was held down by the man's hand on her shoulder. "Don't move. Be careful not to tear the wound." Hearing that, Qing Yu then settled down and did not move. But she still asked in puzzlement, "How did the two of you come to be here?" People of that level, coming out for rigorous training out in the wilderness, would be as good as playing house to them. Hearing that while he was bandaging up the wound, Bai Zhiyan then said teasingly, "It is all because a particular someone heard that you were coming here to such a dangerous place and was afraid that you would bump into stuff and hurt yourself. So he had come whizzing his way here like he was on fire just to protect you." Qing Yu was speechless. The words and tone of voice had been heavily laden, and one might really believe that to be really true. Lu Junyao then shot him a brief glance with eyes that hid a silent warning. Bai Zhiyan was usually flippant with his words and always making jokes, so Qing Yu did not take his words to heart at all. But upon hearing him mention that this was a dangerous place. "What do you know about this place?" Bai Zhiyan curled his lips up in a smile and stretched his hand out to pick up the man who was taller and bigger than he was by the cuff like a kitten and dragged him over. "Here. It's because of this fella here." Qing Yu was a little surprised. "Isn't this that strange man who tried to snatch their food? What is he doing here?" Seeing her looking all confused, Bai Zhiyan then said, "Don't judge this fella here just by his dumb and foolish outlook. He is actually a 12th level spirit beast, good and proper." Hearing that, Qing Yu could not continue to remain calm, her face turning incredulous. "You've got to be kidding. A 12th level spirit beast. But aren't spirit beasts only able to change their forms when they reach level 15? This one here is a lightning blaze unicorn, a species of the most noble bloodline, one that possesses the unique ability to be able to change their form earlier. He is also the one who mistakenly wounded you earlier." Bai Zhiyan had put it across in such a way seeking to have Qing Yu plead for the spirit beast. If he were to really leave the whole matter alone till that brutal and merciless Lu Junyao got his hands on the spirit beast, the poor beast would surely fall back below the 10th level at the very least. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, so that is what happened. Qin Yu's eyes grew thoughtful. That spirit beast who had turned into a man was looking really remorseful and scared at that moment, which really looked so different from the way he had been before. Bai Yen then stretched his hand out to pass her a jade bottle. This is the lightning blaze unicorn's blood. It will be able to alleviate your injuries and you should take it together with healing elixirs. This whole thing was really just a misunderstanding. I had left him in here to recuperate from its injuries and it was really not easy for him to finally attain the 12th level. I would never have expected that it would come to injure you in the end. Qin Yu was not that dense to not detect the meaning behind his words. She curled up the corners of her lips and took the jade bottle. Since it's just a misunderstanding, then we should just forget the whole thing. I'm fine now anyway. Hearing that, Bai Yen enchanting peach blossom-like eyes then brightened as he looked gratefully at her, his liking towards her going up by another few points. The young lady's generosity is really admirable. Chapter 102. 3. Slicing off flesh to treat the wound, but now, how are we going to get out? Qin Yu asked, looking slightly perplexed as she gazed at the darkness surrounding them. I could have taken them out through a dimensional space before, but now that I am injured. She had recovered a little by now and she climbed to her feet. Lu Junyao maintained his original position as he propped up his chin with a palm and looked at her calm and unruffled. What do you think I came here for? With me here, would you still need to worry about such things? Qin Yu then looked at him slyly. Why do you always appear in the very nick of time? You seem to be rather concerned. About my affairs? Just what does this guy here have up his sleeve? Lu Junyao curled up the corners of his mouth and his seductive violet eyes flashed with eye-catching sparkle before he then made a statement that had unclear meaning. Once a hunter has his prey marked, he would always employ all kinds of ways to make the prey let down its guard before it captures the prey in one fell swoop. Qin Yu was a little confused, unable to comprehend what had just been said. Bai Yan's face looked rather sleazy as he leaned in closer to say in a low voice, "Can't you see that he has you marked? So, she is the prey." The corner of Qin Yu's mouth twitched. Ever since she came to be on more familiar terms with them, she found that these two men were becoming more and more abnormal. From the moment that Yen Shiro saw Lu Junyao, that highly noble air and his unparalleled countenance had immediately made her swoon head over heels, especially when she how gentle he was towards Qin Yu. Seeing him walk a little further off, Yen Shiro then quietly scooted over to Qin Yu's side. Who is that man? Why have I never seen him in the capital city before? Qin Yu arched up an eyebrow. What? He caught your eye? Yen Shiro's face flushed slightly red before she said coquettishly, "What nonsense. I was just asking. It's better that you do not know anything about him." Qin Yu said with an indiscernible smile. That man there, is an even more frightening existence than the Duke of Vast Seas himself. Yen Shiro was taken aback, but felt that Qin Yu was hiding the truth. She immediately said in a rather displeased tone, "You don't need to tell me if you are unwilling to, why do you need to spin such a tall story? That young master is clearly such a gentle and refined gentleman." Qin Yu had no words for her. What kind of spell have you come under? Bai Yan's extremely sharp ears caught the words, gentle and refined gentleman, and he suddenly choked on his own saliva. To think that he would be able to meet someone with such a unique sense of judgment in this life, one who claims that the most brutal and tyrannical demon Lord Lu Junyao is a gentle and refined gentleman. To others, ripping a tear into the void was something that would severely drain one's cultivation, but to Lu Junyao, it was just a simple matter of moving his arms. After the entire group of them came out from the dimensional space, they found that they had come to reach the imperial capital in the blink of an eye. Before their eyes, it was the brightly lit up gathered cloud loft, and it was already late at night. I can't believe that we have actually come back. Yen Shiro said excitedly as she held Yen Shiwu's hand and hopped in her spot. She then turned to look at the cold-faced man in his purple robes and said in a coquettish voice, "Thank you, young master, for lending a helping hand. Ro-er cannot be more grateful." Bai Ji Yen felt goose pimples rise on the back of his neck hearing that nauseatingly coquettish voice. And the purple-robed man did not even blink when he then turned to face Qin Yu and said, "Remember to make a trip to come here tomorrow." "Why?" Qin Yu asked in bewilderment. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Lu Junyao swept his gaze over her arms and said indifferently, "Let Bai Ji Yen change the dressing for you. It will not be convenient for you with only one good arm." "That's all right, I can get little Bei to help me. It is best that things like this are handled by an elixir cultivator," Lu Junyao said with grimly. "All right then." Qin Yu did not continue to refuse. "Anyway, it is just a change of dressing." Chapter 103. 1. Target to be top 5. The next day, Qin Fong, who received the news, immediately came rushing over. He had heard about the strange occurrence at Hades Canyon and he had been highly guilt-ridden this entire time. It was after all because he had been just too careless when he failed to investigate into the place thoroughly enough, which then led them to fall into such danger. But the fact that they had finally managed to come back safely was something that made Qin Fong highly curious. As the Hades Canyon had sunk underground completely, how did they manage to come out? In regards to that, Qin Yu had just told him very vaguely about it, that it was a friend who had coincidentally passed by the place who helped them. Qin Fong was rather dubious about the veracity of that claim but then sighed in awe at the young lady's circle of friends. Such a powerful expert. Is probably someone from one of the higher realms. On the other side, although Qin Yu had said that she was not going to hold it against the spirit beast, Lu Junyao was not going to be that easy. Those alluring violet eyes just stared darkly at the lightning blaze unicorn till he was almost going to pee in its pants. Although a level 12 spirit beast could already be considered to be rather high among spirit beasts, but it was not even worth a mention before Lu Junyao. Back in the dark regions, there were a total of 7 super divine beasts and the weakest one among them was already at level 15, and it was a young beast that had just been born not too long ago, already at level 15 from birth. Hence, this level 12 spirit beast was in his eyes, no different from any common domestic pet. It was probably because the lightning blaze unicorn's form after his transformation was an eyesore to him. Lu Junyao went on to change him back into its original form, but restricted its size to be constrained, remaining only as big as a cat or puppy, which just made it look like a queer and pitifully ugly thing. Bai Ji Yen sat at the side, his shoulders shaking uncontrollably, almost driven mad from trying to hold in his laughter. The scene was really just too funny for him to watch. Although the spirit beast understood the rule that might made right very well, but he was after all still a spirit beast of the noblest bloodline, so being treated so humiliatingly, his heart immediately swelled with rebellious anger. He then came to discover that not only was he not able to assume his human form, he was unable to even transform himself back into his original gigantic and majestic shape, but confined in this small tiny body, neither human nor spirit beast. It immediately became infuriated. "What have you done to me?" Lu Junyao raised up a corner of his eye on one side lazily, his voice magnetic and soothing to the ears. "To let you experience what being a pet feels like for a period. From now onwards, you will sleep in there." Following the direction the man's gaze indicated, the lightning blaze unicorn turned his head to see. In a corner fully laid out with straw, was a small-sized doghouse. "You're bullying people too much." The lightning blaze unicorn almost couldn't breathe from his rage. This hateful man was treating him like he would a dog. "Are you then, people?" Lu Junyao snorted derisively. "Don't use your words wrongly. You better behave yourself for a while. Oh. I forgot to tell you. You will not be able to use any of your powers now and are just a common and ordinary little pet. So if you go running outside and attract the eye of other spirit beasts, don't come back crying if you get bullied." Hearing that, the lightning blaze unicorn's beastly eyes widened as he stared, not believing Lu Junyao's words, and he rammed the horn on top of his head onto Lu Junyao's leg. In the end, the spirit beast yelped in pain and fell over to the floor, his eyes misting up with tears. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, why is this man's body harder than a rock? It hurts to death. His actions had proved to himself that he really did not possess a single bit of attack power. If he went out like that, even a stray mongrel would be able to kill him now. How pitiful was it for a powerful level 12 spirit beast to fall into such dire circumstances. Bai Ziyan's face was sympathetic as he shook his head. Only the heavens knew just how black-hearted the man Lu Junyao could really be. No matter man or beast, anyone who offended him would definitely eat the bitter fruit of consequences. But can this be seen as vengeance exacted blind with rage, all for his beloved? Chapter 103. 2. Target to be top 5 at that same time. The day for the Faint Mist Sect's quarterly internal competition was right on the brink of the brow. And those that were brushed off the charts would be demoted to become regular disciples, while the top best 5 positions would receive generous prizes. There were quite a number of disciples competing in the training hall. They had all become a lot more hardworking recently, and people often came in even before the sky turned bright to come secure places for themselves, as there was limited space in there, only enough to hold 100 people when there were over 200 disciples in the inner circle. Hence, fights often broke out to gain entry into the place, with many incidents resulting in bloodshed. And among these 200 people and more, only 30 of them steadily held a position in the inner circle, with many of them being disciples who caught up from behind, having defeated former inner circle disciples. So, there was always a wave of new blood that would bring about a change in the members of the inner circle's disciples every 3 months. The training hall was well equipped with weapons and other equipment. Cultivation speed in here was faster than other places, and one would not be disturbed, so the place was considered a highly prized location with great feng shui in the Faint Mist sect. And in the courtyard behind the training hall, a large space had been cleared out in the middle that was surrounded by a ring of spectators, who broke out into bouts of cheers intermittently. Inside that space, a man and a woman were faced off in battle, and they were both wearing similar white uniforms, the lapel and hem of the clothes embroidered with cloud patterns, that looked highly elegant. Only the top 20 ranks among the inner circle disciples had these uniforms, while the rest of the inner circle disciples would wear full white uniforms without any patterns embroidered on them, and the regular disciples wore ones that were smoky green. The strikes executed by the two opponents were so fast it was dizzying to watch, unable to see their actions at all, and only the sounds when fists and palms clashed could be heard. The two opponents had not summoned up any spirit power at all, purely a match of close unarmed combat, the strength of their physical bodies causing the spectators to sigh in admiration. The ranking of these two have always been so close and equally matched. Who will take the lead this time? But with one ranked 18 and one 19, I feel that they are in a very precarious position, as they are very close to the bottom end. Moreover, I heard that there are quite a few of them with rather strong cultivation in this current batch of disciples, and they will also be getting new recruits soon. The pressure they are facing must be really great. The pressure we face isn't that much less, you know. Instead of us debating about these people who are on the charts, we should be thinking hard on how we are going to defend our own position as inner circle disciples, and not get squeezed out by all those other fellas. As they stood there arguing incessantly, a cold but pleasing voice suddenly sounded. All of you are so free that you've gathered here together to engage in idle chit-chat. Everyone was startled, and they all turned their heads around to look. A young lady with a countenance of unmatched beauty was approaching them with slow steps, her body surrounded by the aloof air of a goddess. Upon her fair forehead was an extremely eye-catching 5-petal flower bloom, which added a dash of glamour and color to that sacred and indecipherable face. It was until she reached them that everyone came to regain their senses. Although the beauty was really very beautiful, but that cold and aloof temper was not all that pretty. Senior Yen. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. This young woman was Yen Ning Luo in the flesh. As the Green Wave Kingdom's most prodigious female, she was ranked on the Faint Mist Sect's Inner Circle Disciples chart, 9th in position. And among the 20 people on that chart, there were only 4 who were female, the other 3 not within the top 10, with Yen Ning Lu being the only female among them, and she also the youngest in age. This made everyone in the inner circle to be fearful of her in some way or another. Moreover, she had gained the sect chief's recognition, and with her powers clear before them, everyone had to respectfully address her as Senior Yen even though she was younger in age. But of course the main reason people were fearful of her was not just because she possessed great power, it was because she had another identity in there, the Vice Hall Chief of the Disciplinary Hall. Chapter 103. 3. Target to be top 5. The Hall Chief of the Disciplinary Hall was a woman over 40 years old and was always stern and strict towards everyone. But it was not known why she came to appreciate Yen Ning Luo very much and went straight to talk to the sect chief about it, who then bestowed the position of Disciplinary Hall Vice Chief on Yen Ning Luo. Once any of the inner circle disciples were found to have broken the sect rules or breached their discipline, she could immediately deliver punishment and just report it thereafter. Hence it could well be imagined just how fearful everyone was of her, afraid that she would find out about any of their indiscretions. So with her arrival, everyone quickly said a quick greeting and they all dispersed like startled birds. As Yen Ning Luo always appeared haughty and aloof, she was not entirely all that popular with people, but with the disciples holding the top 20 ranks, her relationship with them was not too bad. To her, she would only be friends with powerful pugilists. Ning Luo, you've come out from cultivation seclusion. Upon seeing her approach, the 2 people battling then stopped themselves, and the young woman then opened her mouth to ask. Yen Ning Luo nodded her head. How's things? Has it been good for you recently? The young woman then replied with a helpless sigh. Not that great. Master has been exerting pressure on the 2 of us recently. Although we will not be kicked out of the sect if we get squeezed off the charts, Master said that we had better not go back to see him if we are going to bring him shame. Elder Mo is indeed a little more strict, so the 2 of you must really put in your best. Yen Ning Luo curled up her lips to say with a smile. Hearing that, the young woman then looking at her enviously and continued to say. I really admire all of you in the top 10. Even such a young lass like you is so powerful. You are younger than me, but you actually managed to go from being unranked to seizing the 9th rank straightaway within a single year. Have you just been hiding your powers all that time before? Yen Ning Luo bit her lips slightly and answered. I am merely at the bottom of the top 10 ranks. My target is to get into the top 5. Top 5? The young woman was a little shocked before she shook her head lightly. Isn't that target a little tough? You must surely know that those guys there at the top are just legendary in the Faint Mist sect for so many years, and their position has never wavered before. Let's not mention those few right at the very top for a while. Even the 5th-ranked senior Su Mo holds a record that no one in the Faint Mist sect has been able to surpass to this day, which was set when he challenged 300 expert pugilists in one day, and was not defeated even once. It was a record of 300 consecutive victories, which was absolutely no joking matter for anyone. Just by dueling so many matches without stopping alone would already drain one's body out completely already. Hence back when Su Mo achieved the record of 300 consecutive wins, all the teachers had suspected him of taking some kind of restricted drug. But when they checked, he was completely clean and he had done it by just his own power alone, which was just unthinkably incredible. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. It wasn't as if no one had coveted the throne of being among the top 5, but with just Su Mo alone who did not know exhaustion and held such maniacal powers, it was already more than what anyone who tried could overcome, so there was no need to even talk about the few who held even higher ranks. Among females, Yen Ning Luo was unequivocally the top one, but since the beginning of time, women have always been far weaker in physical strength than men, so surpassing those top 5 men who possessed heaven-defying powers would truly be a tough bone to chew, and not something that could be achieved in a heartbeat. Hearing that, Yen Ning Luo laughed softly. Since I had already come to climb up to the 9th position among so many hundreds, the top 5 isn't that much further for me now. Then, I wish you early success. The young woman chirped shyly. Yen Ning Luo turned around and walked away, and she then overheard the soft whisper behind her. It's a good thing to be confident, but overconfidence will then just be conceit. Chapter 104. 1. A guest comes to visit. 6th Young Miss, you have a guest. Qin Yu had just come back from outside, and the guard at the door immediately came forward to report in a soft voice. My guest? Qin Yu raised up an eyebrow. She doesn't seem to have any close friends here in the capital city though. At that moment in the guest hall, Yen Su was entertaining a lady with a tall and slim figure, who was dressed in a light green dress. The lady had a pretty countenance, her bright eyes beautiful and absorbing, that looked highly intelligent. She commanded a noble and aloof air, that made people often overlook her countenance, but they would then quickly become attracted to that unique elegant air she exuded. Lai. Qin Yu's eyes lit up, and she called out rather delightfully. Mu Lai heard the voice and subconsciously stood up to walk a few steps forward before she found herself wrapped within a big hug by the approaching young lady. The coldly pretty face then reddened unnoticeably, and she raised a hand up to return the hug. Yen Su seldom saw the young lady looking so delighted, and he was rather taken aback by surprise. Qin Yu, you are acquainted with young Miss Mu. When the servants had come to announce that a Miss Mu had come to visit, he had initially been rather puzzled. There was only one family clan surnamed Mu in the capital city, and they were a relatively small family clan who were not very well known, so it was thought that they would not call on the manor for a visit so abruptly. But the servant had then said that it was the young mistress of the Mu family that was the topmost elixir cultivator family throughout the lands. Although this Mu family kept a low profile in a remote region at the common border shared among a few countries, but their reputation as the topmost elixir cultivator family far precedes them, known far and wide. Especially the current young mistress of the Mu family, whom was though still a very young lady, was already known to be a rare genius skilled in both medicine and martial arts, the most outstanding talent among Mu family's younger generation. She was after all a young lady who had just turned 18, but the steady and stalwart flair she exuded often made people forget her young age. Qin Yu held the young woman's hand and then said to Yen Su with a smile, Father, this is my good friend, I'll entertain her. If you are busy, just go ahead with your own tasks. Seeing that, Yen Su nodded his head. All right, you ladies will find it easier to talk. Take good care of young Miss Mu. Upon saying that, he then nodded at Mu Lai and he then left. Mu Lai watched Yen Su's figure walk far away and then turned her gaze back. The relationship between the two of you doesn't seem that good. Although Mu Lai herself was not really all that close to her father as well, but her situation was still at least at the level where her father was benevolent and she the daughter filial. But the interaction between Qin Yu and Yen Su was a little more queer. One would not really see anything wrong on the surface, but the highly distant manner of speech and actions between them could not be concealed. Or it should be said that it's Qin Yu who did not seem to be that warm towards her father. That one point would naturally not escape her who had always been sensitive in thought. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Hearing that, Qin Yu's brow lifted up and she said seemingly unconcerned, I wouldn't say it's not good, but just not really all that bad. As that was their family affair, Mu Lai did not go on to probe any further. That's right. Why have you suddenly come to the imperial capital to look for me? Qin Yu asked in puzzlement. I came here purely just to see the place you live in. Mu Lai said, her gaze gentle as she continued, because we saved the assassination temple's chief, they delivered a whole lot of things to the Mu family the very next day. I think they were unable to find you and they then just sent the gifts to me instead. I'll have someone bring it here for you next time. Huh? Qing Yu was taken aback a moment before she waved her hands in front of her. Don't. You just keep those things. There are so many people in your family clan and cultivating elixirs calls for the use of many precious herbs. Moreover, the price of herbs are currently so high in the market, so just keep the things with you and use them to procure more elixirs and medicines. Consider them as blessings to the people. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.